Hello guys, this is Dark Fox Sage 2 and we are back with our new fanfic, which is What If Naruto Was Protected by the Wielder of Midorigan Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic, then please press the like button and please subscribe to the channel. It motivates me to upload more fanfic like these for you all. Now let's start the fanfiction. Konohagakure, the village hidden in leaves, in Hai no Kuni, the land of fire, is still known throughout the shinobi continent as being unrivaled by the others. While each hidden village and country had its strengths, weakness, and special aspects, Konoha would always be regarded as the greatest regardless of history. Konoha would soon fall and suffer a cycle of despair before a new nation took the throne, much like the nations before it. Many of the minor nations today are remnants of once great countries torn apart by bitter enemies and jealous rivals. Two such nations are Grass and Wave. Both held great power under the era of the Great Alliance, but humanity is flawed and even the best of things crumble. And thus the weakening of Great Alliance allowed the establishment of the 5 great shinobi countries. Regardless of the outcome, the former Great Alliance countries varied. Several were now waiting once again for their time to shine, while several were now part of the 5 great shinobi countries. The Great Alliance was a legend within itself, for the history behind itself was not truly known, for several nations across the continent, and very different from each other, were allied. And they were nearly invincible until something had caused it all to crumble. Those nations were all on good terms with each other for the most part, but something just didn't seem to add up. With the Great Alliance gone, several other alliances were formed through the ages, but eventually the 5 great shinobi countries alliance was formed between 2 former members of the Great Alliance, 2 of their enemies, and a fairly new nation in compared with the others. Power and alliances are like waves, forever changing into an escape, predictable yet unpredictable. Note: more information on the Great Alliance will be discussed in a future chapter where the origins of the shinobi world era will also be discussed. There is a reason for all of this history, for there is always a reason behind my methods of madness. A true hero will always arise from the ashes. That type of person will look past their injuries and continue on their path until their goal is accomplished. They are not afraid of showing their emotions when necessary and will also hide their true colors if the situation calls for it. The greatest shinobi to walk the face of the world were always the ones who were able to live 2 lives. A life lived for themselves and a life portrayed to the rest of the world. Always look underneath the underneath. For even the most unbelievable tale can hold a plethora of secrets. Let us watch how the determination of a few can change the path chosen, dictated by fate. The will of fire of one, and the mixed blessing of the other will change the shinobi continent forever. Every hero has dark tales hidden amongst their tales of the glory days. Everyone has skeletons hidden in their closets. Even the beacons of the light have done things that would make you sick to your stomach. Let us begin with the darkest tale of them all. The folly of the Hidden Leaf Village. Something that almost caused the end of the Konoha, as we know it. The difference of one shinobi. Konoha was a beautiful village by many standards. Not even the breathtaking brilliant snowscapes of hidden snow, the distinct cliffs of hidden cloud, the bright shores of hidden mist, or the lush forests of hidden grass. The average lifespan was significantly increased to the prosperity and morality of the village. The Land of Fire was known for its passionate shinobi, but those from the Hidden Leaf Village tended to be more determined and were loyal to with their teammates, at least most of the time. Each village has its own faults. Some value brute strengths, others conformity, bloodline traits, you name it. Konoha valued friendship and loyalty above all. Yes, it was important to complete the mission, but it was also important to always complete the mission. These 2 conflicting principles caused the early deaths of many of Konoha's greatest figures. 12 years before Naruto's academy graduation, the year of the Kyuubi's attack. A blonde teen with green eyes and a very aristocratic-looking face, piercing eyes, defined cheekbones and chin, a well-proportioned nose, etc., could be currently found in none other than the Hokage's office in Konoha's Hokage Tower, with a man that could have easily passed for his father. The only difference was the eye color, the elder with cool blue and the younger with a piercing green. The oddest thing they shared was a very similar hair color, for blonde hair was not very common in Konoha, especially among the shinobi. The hair color was not the same shade, but that was a small matter of very little significance. The office had more seals placed within it than ever before. As we all know, the Yondaime was a master of seals, who surpassed both his sensei, and the sensei of his sensei. He had outclassed the Toad Sannin and the legendary professor of Konoha. Both knew that this would be the final time they would ever see each other. Fate dealt the pair each a hard life, but neither would have the life that a third blonde would be forced to endure for the majority of his existence. For if his sensei succeeded in this ridiculous plan of his, he would forever be sealed with the death god. It would be a small price to pay to defend the village he loved. It was his duty to put the village before his needs and those of his family. The younger, green-eyed blonde wanted to let his sensei watch his son grow up, but both blondes knew there was no other option. The Yondaime's sensei, the legendary pervert, and author of the infamous Orange Book series Ika Ika, and Toad Sannin, Jiraiya, had already tried to convince Arashi to do otherwise, but not even the Sandaime Sasuke Sarutobi was able to change his mind. Even the legendary sucker and slug Sannin, Tsunade Hime, was unable to make Arashi realize the repercussions of his decision. She was normally his voice of reason, and the lack of contingency plans he had made for the future vessel for the Kyuubi no Kitsune. Unbeknownst to the two still loyal Sannin did not realize that Arashi, the Yondaime, was planning on using his own newborn son expected in only a few hours. With a heavy heart he knew that above all his responsibilities to the village came before those for his family and most importantly his responsibilities as a father. There would be more than one soul left to suffer for eternity because of his actions. Arashi deep down knew that the villagers would most likely hate his son, but the shinobi would be logical, wouldn't they? They were taught to look under the underneath, so they should have had no problem realizing the predicament he was placing his one and only son into. Surely the Sandaime, his sensei, and sole remaining student would protect his legacy. Wouldn't they? He knew he could count on the short-tempered, but lovable Tsunade Hime to help his son in the future. Right now he knew she had too much despair and guilt to get out of her system. Of all of Konoha's citizens, none of them seemed to have ever suffered the amount of survivor's guilt the slug princess faced every day and throughout her life. She would never turn down a good challenge. He was sure that if Naruto was anything like him, that he would outsmart the old hag, and gain something priceless out of it. The Kyuubi no Kitsune, the nine-tailed demon fox, the demon lord of fire, head of the tailed foxes, and leader of the Biju, well of the known tailed beasts, for there were a few more powerful out there, could be heard on the prowl in the hidden leaf village, Konohagakure no Sato, destroying everything in its path. The land of fire was always recognized as one of the most powerful, but in this moment of weakness many feared that this would be the end of everything. The war with Earth Country, more specifically the Hidden Rock Village, had left the village understaffed and significantly weakened. The power of the nine-tailed fire fox was unrivaled amongst the other 8 of the infamous Biju that ravaged the continent of the elemental nations and even the most elite of shinobi. Not even the collective power of the 8 other Biju and the greatest Kages ever would be able to defeat it on the battlefield in a fair fight. Each of the Biju each had their own unique characteristics and strengths and weaknesses, but the Kyuubi seemed to be unstoppable. Each tailed beast had its own flaws in elemental or special abilities, but as the king, the Kyuubi seemed to be impervious to everything. The neutral chakra of the nine-tailed fox was the secret behind its strengths, but also the cause of its ultimate downfall. It withstood genjutsu, would be futile to try taijutsu against it, and received minuscule damage from even A-ranked jutsu. Not even the attempts of the Sannin had any impact on the matter, a sad fact when the Sannin were supposed to be some of the greatest shinobi to ever live. Little did they know that a few of their own were the cause of all of this unnecessary devastation. The suffering of a few was excusable for the betterment of many in their eyes. The village of Konoha was covered in a blanket of silence, for a large number of their top shinobi were off defending the village by fighting the beast. It was almost as if a genjutsu had caused all of the inhabitants to freeze in their places and lose control. No one moved from his or her spots. Some tried futile attempts to slay the beast, but ultimately sacrificed their lives for no reason. This uphill battle had not been waged for long, compared to the battles with the lesser-tailed Biju, but the causalities had already begun to grow at an extremely alarming rate. The demon fox's growls grew louder as it approached the Hidden Leaf village. The civilians and children had been evacuated long ago. It would only be a matter of time before the devastation reached the hidden village. This was not Konoha's first exposure to a Biju, but it was definitely the most memorable and frightening, though the other instances had been long forgotten. The most important and forgotten tale was one involving a 10-tailed beast and a wooden statue. Many of the greatest achievements once held by the hidden village were now forgotten with the passage of time. The shinobi fought without any regret against the giant demon beast in an attempt to halt its progress towards the village. They were doing so to protect their loved ones and their way of life. Life is precious. The shinobi of Konoha knew that all too well. Once again Konoha, the village hidden in the leaves, was being brought back into a dark age of chaos, neglect, and death. Keep it up, men. We just need to hold out until Hokage-sama gets here. Just a little longer. We are Konoha shinobi. We will not back down. We shall never back down. This is why we are the strongest of the 5 great nations. We value our comrades and will do what it takes to complete our missions. Right now our mission is to hold back the demon fox until the Yondaime is able to get here to slay it. We must do what it takes, men. We cannot let Hokage-sama down. Yelled an injured special Junin of no significant importance to the shinobi on the bloody battlefield a few miles from the Hidden Leaf village as squad after squad of ninjas went up against the Kyuubi, only to be thrown back and killed moments later. No matter the odds, Konoha shinobi were known throughout the continent for their valor, loyalty, and sheer determination when it came to doing what they did best. However, it appeared to any observer that all of these values were useless, for they were making no headway against the beast and their shinobi were dropping left and right like flies. When all hope seemed to be lost, Gamabunta, the infamous frog boss, was summoned to the battlefield by none other than the recently appointed Yondaime, Arashi Kazama. Gamabunta was the most recognized of the Sanin's boss summons by the populace of Konoha, for neither Orochimaru nor Tsunade had a reason to summon creatures from their contracts. Tsunade rarely summoned in general and Orochimaru only summoned when he had no other choice. Upon Gamabunta's head there was another besides the Yondaime, a blonde baby that was only moments old. If one had a chance to look closer they would have observed the circle of kanji written on the child's stomach. Yes, you guessed it, he was going to use his own flesh and blood in the ritual he was about to commence. This ritual would be the one that would ensure a bright future for the hidden village in the leaves, Konoha, the legacy of the Shadaime and Nadaime. For who could ask another to give up their child? Konoha's yellow flash had begun to form many hand seals as a shadow of the Shinigami, the death god, appeared above him. The Kyuubi no Kitsune didn't know that its fate had already been sealed by the lightning-quick hand seals that the Yondaime had begun making with an unseen speed that were just blurs even with the aided vision of the Sharingan and Byakugan. The demon fox had made a last-ditch attempt to strike at the Yondaime with its 5 of its tails, the ones that contain the 5 main chakra elements: fire, earth, lightning, wind, and water, listed in order from strongest to weakest in terms of the Kyuubi's control. Unfortunately, it was too late, for the Shinigami grabbed a hold of both the Yondaime's and the Kyuubi's souls. And its attempt with the 5 elemental tails was just what the Yondaime had hoped for, as he finished performing a 5-element seal on the stomach of his one and only son, named after his favorite food and the symbol of Konoha, the symbol which represented the 2 founders, a whirlpool of water within a single leaf. His recently born child would be the legacy of more than Kyuubi and the Yondaime infamous Kazama clan. A child robbed of his innocence and childhood. A child robbed of his identity and legacy. A child robbed of his own life. The Yondaime was sure that the village and the Sandaime would take care of his one and only son, but then again he was always too much of an idealist. Before the demon fox had a chance to continue its futile attempts at escaping, the Shinigami pulled its soul out and began to push it into the body of the blonde blue-eyed newborn baby that lay beside the Yondaime on Gamabunta's head. With a flash of light, the kanji on his stomach had begun to change and a sun with a spiral in its center had reappeared where moments before a circle of kanji had lain before. When the sealing was finished, the smoke had cleared and the future of Konoha was forever changed. The Kyuubi was gone. Gamabunta was dispelled, the Yondaime was falling to the ground at an alarming rate, and an orphan, who was also plummeting with the Yondaime, had been given the chance of the lifetime to prove civilization wrong, that the Jinchuriki would not and should be feared for their power, but in turn should be respected and praised for jailing the Biju and protecting everyone else by holding them at bay within their own bodies. For they, the Jinchuriki, do not solely cause chaos throughout the shinobi continent, but could also be used for the side of everything that is good and bring about a new era of change, prosperity, and peace. Maybe the first two were plausible, but there would never be peace amongst the shinobi of the continent, no matter if there were only one nation or 100. Peace would never exist even in a utopian society. Within one of the examining rooms in Konoha's shinobi hospital, was a chamber lit solely by a ring of candles set around in a circle at precise intervals. Between the candles set in a circle along the center of the room was a series kanji seals. The candles and seals surrounded a blonde blue-eyed boy in a circle for one reason. And one reason alone. On his stomach lay one of the most powerful seals in existence, one of which was far superior to the 7 other seals that sealed a similar purpose. Well, 6, as one had been modified for a very important reason. For the Sanbi was no longer the only Biju not housed within a human. It was fitting that the seal for the Kyuubi was the most powerful, a sun being overpowered by a spiral, more specifically a storm maelstrom. The sun being the fire demon and the spiral being Arashi, the Yondaime Hokage, or the child, the demon host, depending on how one looked at it, while this seal would prevent the Kyuubi from taking over in most instances, absorbing too much chakra could overpower the seal. The difference of one shinobi. There were only a few thoughts running through the mind of the recently reappointed Sandaime Hokage, Sasuke Sarutobi. Unsurprisingly, most of them involved reconstruction and funerals, but there was one thing that would not stop haunting his conscience, but he decided to let it pass for now. Forgetting one for the betterment of the collective group is important. Konoha needs to rise from the ashes of defeat once more. I am sorry, Arashi, but the village will not, cannot, and shall not see your son as a hero. They will not even know he is your son, thought the aged Sandaime. To this day no one knows whether the Sandaime's intentions were sincere. He knew Arashi's son would have a hard life, but revealing him as the legacy of the Yondaime would be even more costly. But then again he never thought a clan within Konoha would reveal to the outside world that Naruto housed the Kyuubi. It was interesting why the Sandaime even bothered to reveal the Kyuubi was sealed into Naruto if it was an equally if not more dangerous choice compared to revealing Naruto's lineage. Really, wouldn't it be better for everyone if Naruto were never revealed as having the Kyuubi in him? Sure, he wouldn't want to be the Hokage for the same reasons, but he would still have similar goals, as he would still be an orphan trying to show the world you don't need a clan and/or family for greatness. All in all, we can't change anything, but it does call into the Sandaime's intentions. Sure, he is one of Konoha's biggest optimists ever, but Naruto wasn't the first Jinchuriki ever either. Now we found ourselves once again returning to the office of the Hokage in Hokage Tower in the middle of the Hidden Leaf Village. An orange-clad book lay forgotten on the floor of the office and his crystal ball had rolled away somewhere in the office. Paperwork was covering much of the office, but more surprisingly the Sandaime had his head in his hands, deep in conversation. It looks like Arashi was successful after all, but at what cost? You have saved the village, but have damned your own child to a life of hardships. You wanted your legacy, your son Naruto to be treated like a hero for having the Kyuubi sealed within his body and soul. I will follow your request, but I am not sure if the village will follow suit. Maybe it was wrong of me to reveal Naruto's status, but I thought of it was for the best at the moment. He will grow into a fine shinobi though. This will only drive him further. I truly thought they would accept him. I guess I was wrong. Forgive me, Arashi, Sarutobi sighed. I'll do everything I can to make sure that your final request is followed, but I have a feeling it will not happen. Naruto, you have a rough life ahead of you. With great power comes great responsibility and great sacrifices. And I know that you will face many challenges, but if you are anything like your father, I know that your stubbornness will help you outshine those around you and overcome the difficulties of being an orphan. It is a shame that neither Jiraiya nor Tsunade are here, the old monkey man thought before once again turning back to dust off and pick up his favorite orange book once again with a lecherous laugh that rivaled even the author's. Note, I am referring to Jiraiya, not me. The difference of one shinobi. Throughout the shinobi world several shinobi were sneezing. There is an old saying that if you sneeze, someone is talking about you. A few people would find out how true the old wife's tale was head on. One was in one of the grandest casinos ever built within the land of rain. Despite her reputation for never paying her debts, this casino had welcomed her with open arms and even started her off with a tab. Her sneeze had led her to winning the biggest jackpot of her lifetime, an omen of bad things to come. A second individual was just caught peeping by a group of women at a hot spring in the hidden grass village. And even more surprisingly, they did not attack, they did something completely unpredictable. They began to grope him and do everything he had ever dreamed of. Despite his many fantasies, Jiraiya knew this was a bad omen, but as he put it, a chance like this only comes once in a lifetime, especially in my lifetime. The third and final individual began to toss and turn in his bed. His dreams were plagued by dark thoughts that made even the most grim of nightmares seem like dreams of rainbows and unicorns. The attending nurse knew she only had so much time left in Konoha, but could tell the child would not live an easy life. A mirror in the room shattered and it confirmed her thoughts. She knew she had to leave, but felt guilty for doing so. One more night, I will stay one more and that's it. I must follow his orders. I cannot risk being caught here or Naruto will never stand a chance. I am sorry Naruto, but I know someone will take up the task. The difference of one shinobi. Meanwhile, overlooking the chaos and destruction were menacing pale yellow eyes watching the chaos from afar. The eyes barely resembled those of a human, though they were of a similar size. It was almost as if a human had the appearance of a creature. The overall appearance was very creepy when one thought about it. Those eyes held more dark and twisted secrets than anyone else that ever existed in the history of the shinobi world. Note: I will elaborate on the shinobi world versus the world in future chapters. The shadow enveloped, a figure that once held Get Promise, was not slowly crafting a perfect chain of events. There would be no room for error, and not chance of escape. Suddenly the being had decided to make its presence known to the world by opening its mouth, uttering a creepy chuckle, and then proceeding to talk to themselves saying, "Kukuku, everything is going exactly as planned, Sarutobi-sensei has not changed one bit. All the pieces seem to be falling into place. In a couple of years I will have the perfect weapon." And as sudden as they had appeared, the pale yellow eyes of that person being had disappeared from existence with such speed it made one wonder if they had ever existed in the first place. That individual had disappeared without a sound, with even less sound than a clone that had been dispelled by an item, object or person. The difference of one shinobi. Many of the council elders had called for the immediate execution of the Kyuubi's vessel, but the Sandaime Hokage of Konoha would not hear it. Many of them feared for the possibility of the Kyuubi escape. But more of them were bitter at the Yondaime. For instead of making harsher restrictions on shinobi, he made it so even orphans could rise up in the ranks. They had conveniently forgotten that he himself was an orphan. Arashi had been forced to grow up with only himself to look out for. It was quite ironic how some of the greatest shinobi of Konoha were orphans from the beginning. Two of the Sannin Orochimaru and Jiraiya. Tsunade was orphaned later on Arashi the Yondaime, his student Rin, and now young Naruto Uzumaki, the container of the Kyuubi no Kitsune and holder of a very special bloodline. A bloodline that made both one of his families very important in the shinobi world, historically and physically. Sure, there were other great orphan shinobi, but these 5 shinobi had one similarity: they were all orphans from the beginning. Yet no one could see that, for all of the great clans, whether they had bloodline limits or just family jutsu, did not want their power threatened by the possibility of a stronger shinobi arise with abilities they knew next to nothing about. They only saw the child as being the reincarnated Kyuubi who had no skills or power of his own, a liability if you will. Some called for his death, others wanted him turned into a living weapon, but Sarutobi knew he had to make it up to Arashi and Naruto for making his past mistakes regarding the matter. It had only been a month or so since the attack. Sarutobi was extremely disgusted with his former teammates Koharu and Homura, who in particular had no problem with defying the dying words of the Yondaime. These 2 village elders knew how demon containers were not the demons themselves, but wanted to find a scapegoat for all of the destruction and loss of lives. Koharu and Homura also had another reason for doing so. They hated the Yondaime, they didn't like the changes he was making to modernize the village, they didn't like his stance on orphans, and they most importantly did not like his status as his orphan. Sarutobi-san, I think you know as much as I do, that child should be killed. If the Yondaime had any brains, he would have sealed the child into a child of a prestigious bloodline that would negate the influence of the Kyuubi and only make them a container as opposed to being a vessel, Koharu said with an air of arrogance that would put a Hyuga or an Uchiha to shame. Koharu, I don't see how a container differs from a vessel if the 2 both contain something. A demon container does not become the demon, for they only hold the demon at bay, they do not become one being. And pray tell how a bloodline, especially any one of Konoha's bloodlines, would be able to hold back the most powerful Biju's influence. Sarutobi-san, I think that the Koharu-san, Homura began. Homura, it is almost as if both of my former teammates are scheming something. We are not doing anything. We are only thinking of, they both started at the same time before being cut off. Only thinking of yourselves. You two, the most out of anyone else here, should know how the Jinchuriki are. Every single one of the villagers, whether they are civilian or shinobi, are just too damn ignorant for their own good. Anyone with half a brain cell could see how stable the child is. He only contains the Kyuubi, but as you know, the seals used to contain a Biju prevent the vessel from merging unless their mental state becomes unstable due to mental and physical abuse from their villages. If all of you continue on the path you are, Naruto will become unstable and we may have to face that possible future. But if you do the right thing now and solely think of him as a child with a bloodline limit, if you will, then maybe we have a chance to have a fiercely loyal and powerful shinobi for the Hidden Leaf Village that may even give myself and Sannin a run for our money. Some of the clan elders were not that reserved as to not hesitate about openly defying the Sandaime. Their only interests were those of their allying clans, being a thorn in the side of their enemies, and most importantly helping their own clans rise above the rest. The Yondaime was not of pure enough to hold the title of Hokage for many of them. Many were glad he was gone on the inside, for his power was a threat to their monopoly of control on the hidden village held by the shinobi clans that have been shinobi for many generations. But then, after hearing what the Sandaime had to say, a few were beginning to change their minds. A few knew about Biju and their containers. Something seemed to click in the minds of those who were informed of this matter. It was true that some of the characteristics of a Biju were passed on to their offspring. Any of the Kyuubi's powers in general would create an unstoppable new bloodline that could make Konoha even greater. Several clans were furious they could do anything, for they did not have any female heirs, that is to say that the only females in their clans married into them. But at the same time not many of them wanted to marry one of their clan to an orphan, no matter how promising a union could be. But if the marriages didn't work after a child would be born, it would return with the mother to her clan, thus being a win-win situation for those who were able to see past him being both an orphan and housing the Kyuubi no Kitsune. The Yondaime has come up with a plan that cannot fail. As those who are informed of the matter already, the seal used to seal Biju away summons the death god to do the sealing process at the cost of the caster's life. The Shiki Fujin no Jutsu has been used for generations to seal away the Biju, as noted in the scrolls we have from the Shadaime. The seal the Yondaime created is an improved version of the Shiki Fujin no Jutsu that will not only seal the Kyuubi permanently but will also in time kill the Kyuubi by transferring all of its knowledge and chakra to its vessel. And the vessel in turn receives almost infinite chakra reserves without having to worry about the Kyuubi trying to escape. The Kyuubi's chakra will little by little leak into the vessel's chakra system, which in turn will convert and absorb it in order to make it its own. The best part of the seal is that Naruto will not become the Kyuubi, for this fusion of knowledge and chakra is not sentient. Unlike the Shiki Fujin no Jutsu, where there is the possibility of contact and corruption, the Kyuubi will only come into contact with his vessel when he needs to summon chakra. This seal does not fuse their minds, only their chakra, thus eliminating any chance of him becoming the Kyuubi incarnate. Though if all of you continue down this path, even a normal child may seek revenge for the wrongs committed against him. The council was given some time to think, as this was a lot to absorb. Many of the older, more traditional, and younger clans were very hesitant to accept this matter, for they would always see the child as a demon. Very few could think otherwise for all of the precious people they had lost to the Kyuubi. The Sandaime once again began to try to instill a sense of reason into the council. If a vase holds water in it, does the vase become water? If we eat beef, do we become cows? The answer to both questions is no. The same logic should be used in regards with the Yondaime's legacy, young Naruto Uzumaki. You all know he was regarded throughout the continent, even in Cloud and Stone, as the world's premier sealing expert, even surpassing Jiraiya and myself. So I think we will all be able to have faith in his work. Newborn babies are used as vessels, for their chakra coils are still new enough to incorporate a Biju's chakra into their own. In a sense it is like a bloodline limit, for despite the chakra exhaustion, they received unique gifts that are exclusive to themselves and sometimes their offspring. The last bit was met with confusion, for it was very rare that a vessel was even alive long enough to have children. Even more rare for one to have children successfully, for it was hard enough for them to find a mate. Not even the orders of a cage could do so. The last wish of the dying Yondaime Hokage, Arashi, was for this newborn infant, Naruto Uzumaki, to be treated as a hero for being the Kyuubi's container. You have heard the tales of both Kumo's Nibi no Nekomata, two-tailed demon cat, and Suna's Ikibi no Shukaku. First we shall discuss the Nibi. The Nibi was sealed into a child, with great promise. She has become a force that even rivals Kakashi Hatake at his prime, with her not being at full power. However, Kumo does not have to worry about her because she is fiercely loyal to the council and Raikage, who took her away from a life of hunger and abuse, and gave her a life of adventure, potential, and to a small extent promise. But her potential has been wasted, for she had been forced to become a living weapon from the moment it was sealed within her. Had she been able to move at her own pace, instead of being forced to do so for all of her childhood, she would have become an even bigger threat to us. Luckily for us that did not happen, despite that she still remains a huge threat, as do several of the other demon vessels. Many nations out there are claiming that they possess one, but there are far too many claiming to have one of the 9 Biju. Between Kumo, Suna, and Konoha there are 3 already. The 3 tails has been loose for as long as I remember. So there are 4 known Biju, and yet more than 12 villages claim to have the remaining 5. If we could give him a stable upbringing, he would be fiercely dedicated to protecting the village. Otherwise he could become a liability. You all do realize that disobeying a Hokage's command is treason. Not even you the council have the power to overrule a command such as this. For the Shadaime and Nadaime made sure there were loopholes for the Hokage. You will never outsmart me, for I have justice on my side, unlike all of you. All of you want to end the life of an innocent boy who has done nothing but prevent the Kyuubi from causing further death and destruction, yet you all want to kill him and potentially release the Kyuubi no Kitsune once more. I would not be surprised if your choices today will come back to haunt you in the future. You all remember the pranks of Arashi as he was scorned for being an orphan. Can you imagine the pranks Naruto will unleash on this village if you all continue to scorn him for being both an orphan and the vessel for the nine-tailed demon fox lord, the Kyuubi no Kitsune? The council was silent. It was well known that Kumo's Jinchuriki had been turned into a living weapon and was as mentally stable as a normal person for the most part. However, most of the Jinchuriki were seen as solely being the demons reincarnated, the fate of Tsuna's Ikibi no Shukaku, and were completely dangerous and out of their minds. They have all been outwitted at their own game. Only a few clan heads were with the Sandaime with the beginning, but he knew that they must remain silent for their own safety. But silence was better than treason. However, the promise of having another Nibi was very promising to a few, for the Kyuubi had mastery of all elements and had a millennia's worth of jutsu and knowledge in general. The aged Sandaime was facing an uphill battle by upholding Arashi's dying wish. He was beginning to wonder why he was doing so himself with the uphill battle he was currently faced with. And if things could have not gotten worse, the Haruno clan had decided to start something that Konoha could not deal with at the moment, an attempted coup d'état. A Haruno had jumped from his seat to attack the infant in front of the Sandaime. The pink-haired clan was known for both their insane inner mind, a second personality that saw no reason, for that clan had book smarts, but were useless in every other sense in the shinobi way. It was a surprise that any became genin at all. It was more surprising how their clan held some power in the council despite over 97% of the shinobi candidates in that family did not even make it past genin if they even got that far. Little did the Sandaime know, but a certain blonde boy would be forced to be on a squad with one of them, one of the worst the village had ever seen, due to the stipulations regarding how genin squads were formed. The crush he would develop for the pink-haired girl would be for all of the wrong reasons. The problem with the Haruno clan ran far deeper than solely with the clan head. Their instances with treason would far in between, but this would not be the last instance. They only had loyalty to themselves. They held no powerful ranks in the shinobi community. They held no power in the villagers' daily lives. A question many had and could not answer, including Danzo, Sarutobi and his teammates, and even Orochimaru, was how the FCK, that useless clan, held power for so long. Not even Orochimaru or Danzo were as sick and twisted as a Haruno. Little did they know, but the Haruno were already plotting. Everyone said they originated in the land of fire, but that was far from the truth, and in a few years Konoha would face that problem head-on. Die demon, the pink-haired elder said before he was stopped by an Anbu with a cat mask. Said Anbu would later become an important figure in Konoha for specific reasons. His abilities were very unique despite the circumstances under which he acquired them. Several other clan heads had joined the Haruno head in the attempted coup, but they were about to pay the ultimate price. Most of said clans were either old clans that were furious that they were passed over for being Hokage several times, or young clans trying to gain power at any cost, even if it meant eliminating the current Hokage and attempting a coup. Sarutobi stood up and cleared his throat before announcing, "As of today no one is allowed to speak of the Kyuubi and its connection to Naruto Uzumaki. The Yondaime sacrificed his life by sealing the Kyuubi into this child before you to end its rampage. If anyone tries to defy this order they will be immediately executed and recorded as a committing high treason. This is a secret that no one may speak of. I am disgusted with all of you here. If you try to go around this and try to have your children hate Naruto for no reason, your clans shall be at risk also." All of you have emotional span of a teaspoon and the intelligence of a rock. Few of you even respect and believe in the Yondaime. Most of you are still bitter that an orphan surpassed you all and became a Hokage and that none of you ever have a chance of following suit. If Tsunade and Jiraiya were here right now, you would all be wishing Orochimaru would come back and kill you all. I thought you were all trained as shinobi for a reason. One of this village's highest principles is looking underneath the underneath. Yet few even bother to look past the fact that Naruto has the Kyuubi sealed within him and instead decide he is the Kyuubi instead. Such ignorance may cost your lives and the future of this village. Being the jailer for a Biju is a difficult task that should receive praise, but instead they are almost always scorned for doing so. We, i.e. the Yondaime and Sandaime, hope that you would want to once again show why we are the greatest of the nations and hidden villages, but I guess we were wrong. You all want put aside your petty differences. We all lost precious people to us, but do not let their deaths be in vain. Murmurs of him being replaced were quietly silenced. Silence. I am within my rights as Hokage. While none of you have access to many of the secret scrolls of our hidden village, it is well known that abusing a child to any degree is well within the grounds for treason. The Yondaime has placed his trust and faith in all of us, and yet all of you are more determined in furthering your clans than the welfare and future of this village, the Sandaime shouted in a tone that was rarely used. The root head, Danzo, was originally holding the same thoughts as the majority of the decision-makers in Konoha. Naruto should be killed. But then he realized what kind of an asset he could be in helping him create a new Konoha. The Nibi no Nekomata had been successfully raised into a successful ninja, albeit slightly abused and a little paranoid, but well-rounded enough. He had just thought of something that would help bring about his greatest vision. All he needed to do to create a stable and powerful vessel like Yugito, the Nibi's container, was showing compassion and concern almost like a family, and then it would be hook, line, and sinker. The Raikage took the young orphan girl in, and in no time she quickly rose the ranks to bolt in no time, was accepted by a majority of the hidden village, and most importantly felt safe at home. Yes, all of this was classified information, but Danzo got everything he wanted, outside of Konoha thanks to the network established by a certain clan within Konoha. Hokage-sama, might I suggest that Naruto. However, Sarutobi knew what the old war hawk was up to and cut him off before the proposition was ever made. Danzo, root will not be re-established. Arashi was correct in disbanding that branch of Anbu, and it was done with a 9/10 majority. If I learn that you are still operating, yourself and any shinobi found under you will be immediately executed. Naruto will never become your living weapon. He is Arashi's legacy and you will follow it. The old war hawk knew he had outsmarted and outed, but he would never give up on his vision of a new Konoha. A certain yellow-eyed traitor had made a deal that would later change the future of Konoha. He would lay low, but root would never be disbanded, for from the ashes always arises a bright future. 7 years before Naruto's academy graduation, 5 years after Kyuubi's attack. 5 years had passed since that fateful night in October when the Kyuubi had attacked Konoha and the Yondaime Hokage had perished in the battle and was forever immortalized as a hero of the village hidden in the leaves. While one person went down in history as a hero, there was a young boy that had been given a burden that forever changed his life. While the battle had been solely blamed on the Kyuubi randomly rampaging through Konoha and slaughtering the village's shinobi, there was much more to the story than meets the eye, for the Kyuubi had attacked the village for a reason, and for now it shall remain unknown. The incident with Kumo involving the attempted kidnapping of Hinata Hyuga was well carved into the memory of many in Konoha and only fed fuel to the fire that is the constant feud shared between the lands of lightning and fire. The two were not always enemies, but recent events had caused many things to change throughout the elemental nations. Under the guise of a peace treaty, Kumo had sent shinobi to capture a Hyuga in order to obtain the Byakugan. Kumo was well aware that Hizashi had taken the place of his elder brother, however they had gained nothing, for Hizashi Hyuga's caged bird seal was activated once handed over, thus eliminating any chances Kumo would gain the Hyuga's Kekkei Genkai. But that is not to say Kumo did not gain anything out of this turn of events. While Kumo had failed to gain the Byakugan of the Hyuga, they had gained something far more dangerous if the hands of the wrong people, a child of the Sannin. Yes, the living legacy of the Sannin. A child whose future held great promise, unrivaled. The power alone the child would exert alone would be enough to make many tremble. The abilities then ran through his veins would make him a legend regardless of how good of a shinobi he became, for some skills were more valuable than experience. But for now he was only following his deceased sensei's orders to do everything it took to protect his son, the vessel of the Kyuubi no Kitsune, and the resident prankster, number one most predictable person in Konoha, Naruto Uzumaki. The blonde teen knew he wouldn't be here to protect Naruto in person, but eliminating the threat of Kumo was much more important. Besides, if he had planned everything out correctly, it would only be a short matter of time until he found a worthy shinobi role model other than himself and the Yondaime. Meanwhile, a man with giant eyebrows sneezed. And as a blonde green-eyed boy walked away from Konoha with the Kumo shinobi, tears were running down his face. This was the hardest decision he had ever had to make. He knew it was not as difficult as the one the Yondaime had to make, but at his age it seemed much more troubling. The teen knew that Naruto would have a difficult life, but hopefully everything would go according to plan, or he would not be able to return to Konoha someday to continue protecting his sensei's son personally. Sarutobi, look after Naruto. I am sorry I have to do this, but this is the only way to save the Leaf Village. My life is meaningless if you fail to live as the Yondaime's legacy. Be strong, little one. The golden eagle shall return to you someday. The green-eyed boy continued to move along the trail with the nin from Kumo. He felt guilty for leaving Naruto behind, but it was either that, or let Kumo, the hidden cloud village of the Land of Lightning, get their hands on a second demon vessel, Naruto. He had promised his sensei he would do everything in his power to ensure Naruto never got into the wrong hands. Right now he wished he could actually be in two places at once, for no type of bunshin could survive the distance between Kumo and Konoha for any period of time. He had a feeling something bad was about to happen, but surely someone would take care of Naruto in his stead, right? Little did he know, the green-eyed young man was very wrong. The next few years would be the final straw for the blue-eyed Naruto. Something would break within him, something that would make him see the Kyuubi with reason. No matter what happened, he knew there would always be people within the village that would treat Naruto fairly, no matter how few there were. They would be enough no matter how long it took for him to make it back to Konoha. Well, if he ever did, for deceiving the Kumo nin into thinking that he was the nine-tailed fox's vessel. Little had happened in the once again bustling village of Konoha in the past few days, but a few individuals felt a sense of emptiness. It was almost as if something was missing in their lives, something that they had taken advantage of. They were so used to his presence in their lives that these two people in particular felt as a part of themselves had been stolen away in some twist of fate. Several days had passed since a young shinobi had sacrificed his life in order to not only allow peace, but to also ensure the survival of one blonde blue-eyed child with the Kyuubi sealed within him by posing as the Kyuubi vessel, the true reason they, the Kumo nin, had entered the hidden leaf village. They had long gotten over the fact they would never get the Byakugan unless a main house member was kidnapped or became a missing nin, but let the world believe they were still focused on that task in order for their actions to be overlooked as nothing more than a hopeless cause. The task was done with a heavy heart and empty stomach, lol for those Iron Chef America fans out there. For he knew that Naruto would not have the same protection that he once had, but there still were several shinobi that would protect him, the ramen stand family, and a few other people, though Naruto knew few of their names. This young man had chosen a life of hard decisions and heartache in order to prevent Naruto from being turned into a living weapon. Then again, he had chosen a hard life in general because he had no other decision. It was either be an ordinary shinobi or even worse, simply a civilian. The Yondaime had simply given him an offer he couldn't refuse. For who would want to live in an orphanage for the majority of their life and have no precious people? It would change a long and carefully planned chain of events, dictated by faith and meddled with Orochimaru, but he would take that risk, he simply had no other chance. It was either his possible death or Naruto losing his free will and innocence. He was supposed to remain hidden from Konoha for so long, but what better way than infiltrating Kumo? He still felt guilty about making his decision, but he had no other choice. He knew that Maeda Gai, Ibiki Morino, or Anko Mitarashi would most likely find him in time. He just felt guilty for abandoning his remaining precious people in order to complete his sense's final mission. He could only hope that Kakashi Hatake, Jiraiya, or Kurenai Yuhi would not find him. The first would want to kill him, the first two would also want to make him into a super pervert like themselves, and the third would be royally pissed off when she would see through the entire thing. Washi shivered when he thought of what would happen when Kurenai discovered everything. He knew she had no ill feelings toward the child, but she had always suspected him of leading a double life, and that's all he needed. Being an unregistered shinobi was a serious capital crime. He would have to be careful, very careful. There was no way to tell if he would fail in this personal crusade, but he would give it his all. Then again, if any uninvited appearance by any of those three in Hidden Cloud Village would be enough to break the non-aggression pact recently settled only a few days ago. The Kumo shinobi knew from the start that the real objective was not to obtain the Byakugan, but rather to capture the child that they had heard so much of from the wreckage, but unfortunately word of the demon container was not so accurate as was expected. The main source of the information came from a source that would seem unreliable to anyone, but the wreckage. The Kumo Nin in general had received information from several reliable sources ranging from the poorest most despicable shinobi with no futures to the legendary traitor, pedophile Sannin Orochimaru. The fatal error of the Kumo shinobi was not the hair color, but the eye color and the age. They had been only told that the child was male, blonde, and resembled a Hokage. With there only being one blonde Hokage, the Yondaime, they automatically assumed that the child with the Kyuubi sealed within him had blue eyes also. Little did they know that eye color would forever change their plans. One small detail would throw off months of careful preparation. None of the scenarios they planned out had even come up with something like this. Both Naruto and Washi were blonde and had facial structures that resembled some of the Hidden Leaf Village's greatest heroes, but all of this was overlooked, for no one would think that an orphan would ever be related to some of the greatest men in the history of the elemental nations. They Kumo Nin would be in for a world of hurt when they arrived in the Hidden Cloud Village and reported into the wreckage, for they had not captured the demon vessel of the Kyuubi, but rather had gained control of the legacy of the Sannin. No one knew that being the legacy of the Yondaime meant much more than having the yellow flash sealing the king of the Biju, the Kyuubi no Kitsune, into you. No, legacy should have been interpreted in another, somewhat unpredicted way. They had taken a green-eyed adolescent instead of the blue-eyed child. A fatal error on their part that could have cost them their lives. It is still not known what happened to them, for only one of the Kumo Nin sent on the mission has been seen since, and she is only known to have survived, for she was captured by a rogue organization of missing nin that resembled a cult in some aspects. It was well known that the blonde child with them had a great future ahead of him. He was quite the genius, maybe not up to the greatness of the despicable Kakashi Hatake, the traitorous Itachi Uchiha, or the disturbing Orochimaru, but many felt he would be a force to be reckoned with. However, his i.e. Washi connection was not known to anyone within the village of Konoha besides the Yondaime, the Hyuga clan head's wife, and an orphan by the name of Rin. However, the problem with that is that the first two individuals were long dead, and the later was the problem. Rin was an orphan adopted by the Inuzuka clan for reasons that even the Sandaime didn't know, even with the use of his crystal ball. It was rumored that she was an illegitimate heir or had some secret ability similar to their own. Either way, it doesn't matter, for the Hidden Leaf Village considers her dead, for not a single trace of her has been found since the Kyuubi attack. This young man had no shinobi training except from a kind-hearted man and a once bright cheerful girl. The disappearance of Rin had created a downward spiral of events that ruined the lives of 3 shinobi in particular: Kakashi Hatake, Naruto Uzumaki, and the young shinobi now in the possession of Kumo. He would not be missed for the simple reason that no one knew that he existed. There were people that knew him, but they were all either dead or missing, except for one man that to this day never knew who the Golden Eagle truly was. One cannot miss one who they do not know. He was a nobody in the Hidden Leaf Village, for no one cared about an orphan civilian child. One of the most trusted of the Konoha shinobi had committed one of the highest acts of treason. And then an entire clan had done something that no one had expected, not even in their wildest dreams. They had revealed the identity of a demon container to an enemy nation, and not any nation, but Kumo. And you may ask, who did such a horrid deed? You think that a Konoha nin would never do such a thing? You would be completely wrong, for corruption ran much deeper through the roots of the tree that is Konoha than one would think, with their reputation for loyalty, friendship, and justice. Sometimes those who are always left in the shadows get a chance of a lifetime that they refuse to pass up. A taste of forbidden fruit is always better than an ordinary piece of fruit because it is forbidden. Who needs loyalty to a village of weak and ignorant villagers when another village offers you a much better deal for being who you want to be and saying what you want to instead of following meaningless edicts of your current cage? Having a facade does not always mean you are weak. Sometimes hiding the true you will get you much farther in life. It is a much safer path most of the time, especially for traitors. Selling out an innocent villager of your home village is even worse than attempting to assassinate a cage that has the resources to protect themselves. So getting back to the treacherous Konoha clan that sold out the village, it was none other than the difference of one shinobi. The legendary sucker, the Slug Princess, the Queen of Elixirs, granddaughter of the Shadaime, first Hokage, great niece of the Nadaime, second Hokage, student of the Sandaime, third Hokage, and voice of reason to the Yondaime, fourth Hokage. It would seem like destiny was telling her something that she didn't want to hear. Based on all of her connections to the previous 4 Hokages, it was no surprise when she was asked to become the Godaime Hokage for the village hidden in the leaves, the true gem of the Land of Fire. Although the Fire Daimyo controlled more power in regards with money, it was the Hokage that everyone looked to for the answers, and also it was the Hokage everyone she loved minus the Sandaime who she respected more than love, that wanted to become Hokage and or had become Hokage had died. And most of them wore the necklace worn by the Shadaime during his reign in the founding days of Konoha. Moments ago the legendary Sannin Tsunade had won a giant jackpot from a slot machine that she had always avoided. For everyone who played it was guaranteed to lose no matter how many times they tried. The Slug Princess had little to lose at this point, so she dug into her change purse, from her cleavage. Yes, this little money she did have was hidden in the once place no gentleman or pervert would dare look for fear of her wrath, and tossed in a few of the remaining coins and pulled the lever. Moments later bells and sirens began making loud noises throughout the casino, lights were flashing, people stopped talking and their glares all seemed to solely focus on her, almost as if they were judging her, and coins were flying out of the machine like there was no tomorrow. Tsunade Hime was known throughout the world for her gambling addiction and her horrible luck. Even more famous than that was her infamous cleavage and constant genjutsu she wore. Little did she know that all of her accelerated aging was caused by more than her special jutsu. Her apprentice Shizune had never seen so much money in her entire life. Even Tsunade's pet pig Tauntaun was scared by the omen that this lucky winning streak has foretold. Tsunade knew something was wrong but did not dare turn back to Konoha. The deaths of her love Dan and her little brother Nawaki had been too much for her to bear. A jackpot of this magnitude was something that truly frightened her, but she vowed to never to return to Konoha. She had broken enough promises already to her loved ones, her apprentice and pet pig were all she would remain attached to. She had even pushed away her sensei and remaining teammate Jiraiya. She was isolate herself from Hokages and those that dreamed of being one in hopes of losing no more precious people in her lifetime. Shizune, the niece of Tsunade's former love, Dan, had come to see her master as an older sister who had more faults than Swiss cheese has holes. Dan was a fine shinobi and everything she ever wanted in a man: humble, honest, supportive, romantic, and easygoing, yet not everything was perfect beneath her calm and happy exterior. Who she once thought was the love of her life, now seemed like nothing more than a regret. Now it seemed like everything she believed in and once held close shifted in priority. She was about to embark on a long journey that would bring her full circle. It would reignite the spark and show her what she always had and never lost. Tsunade was a decent role model for any kunoichi, albeit a chronic gambler with the worst luck in the love and a love for sake, only rivaled by her former teammate and fellow Sannin Jiraiya, is not someone that should be seen as a role model, for she broke all three of the three shinobi vices, like both of her teammates, which are women, in a kunoichi's case men, alcohol, sake, and money, gambling. And even then Jiraiya's did not outshine her love for sake by a long shot. Every shinobi had their own shortcomings. Kakashi Hataki's addiction to porn, smut, Anko Mitorashi's obsession with dango, Ibiki Morino's obsession with eagles, Hayate Gecko's obsession with pain, Sasuke Sarutobi's addiction with controlling and manipulating others' lives, Kurenai Yuhi's Ice Queen persona, Genma Shiranui's Senbon chewing habit, and lastly her former teammate Orochimaru's uncontrollable lustful obsession with power and boys. Despite any shortcomings one may have, they are most commonly a source of distraction from the life of a shinobi. One is to never grow numb when killing a person, or you become nothing more than a killing machine, a soulless shinobi without a purpose. To be successful one must have a purpose in life and at least one precious person. Tsunade knew something bad had happened but dare not return to Konoha, for she had lost too many people she loved there. She had left after her favorite blonde prankster, well for now, as Naruto would become her favorite in a few more years, had decided on doing something that would forever ruin the lives of everyone that cared about him and those he himself cared for. She had never been the same after the death of her fiancé and love Dan. But it was not until Arashi came up with that knuckle-headed plan of his that she finally had enough with the village. She was sick of the men she loved sacrificing themselves for the good of the village. She knew the Yondaime had come up with a plan involving Summon the Shinigami, but she had no clue that he had decided to seal the Kyuubi within his own son. To this day she was not even aware that he had his son until a boy with a similar appearance and personality came with her former perverted teammate to request that she become the Godime. All that remained of their referring to her grandfather the Shadaime, her great-uncle the Nadaime, her fiancé Dan, and her brother Nawaki, memories was the necklace of the Shadaime. That very necklace had ended the lives of many men too important to her far too early. While the Yondaime had never received the necklace, he had suffered the same fate as her grandfather and great-uncle. A very special object that would later change the lives of herself, a certain knuckle-headed blonde loud ninja by the name of Naruto Uzumaki. It takes time for wounds to heal, and by the amount of loss and destruction she had witnessed, it would be many years until she would return to fulfill her legacy, not as a Sannin, but as one in a line of great shinobi. The difference of one shinobi. The connoisseur of sake and fine ladies, the great author of the infamous Ika Ika series, the Frog Hermit, Jiraiya had experienced the same amount of bad luck. The frog sage was nothing more than a lecherous old man with the attention span and the maturity of a child. But that had not stopped him from obtaining fame on and off of the battlefield, and in the bedroom sometimes. 9p Though his unsuccessful exploits with women, addiction to sake, and infamous Orange Book series were the things he was remembered for. Jiraiya is world-renowned for his perverseness, which is expressed through his book series and the hordes of women that chased after him for the degrading depiction of women in said book series. Except in this case he was having extreme luck with the ladies. This is as likely as Tsunade winning several jackpots in a row, but as you the reader have witnessed, the improbable are still possible despite how unlikely they may appear to be. The self-proclaimed super pervert was having woman after woman chasing after him. And no, we are not talking about chasing him for spying on them in the springs. No, these women were chasing and fighting for Jiraiya, not for the chance to kill or castrate the self-proclaimed super pervert. No, they were fighting to have his child, not for the money or the prestige but to be the mother of his child, for they thought he was sexy. The men staying at the same hotel as Jiraiya were fuming with anger. A. Jiraiya had a crowd of women chasing after him wanting to have sex with him and tearing off all of his clothes. B. They were their wives and girlfriends. So now Jiraiya was not only running from the mob of the rabid women, but also very angry and jealous men. Jiraiya was always a bit of a loose cannon, but this really took the cake. He always pushed his luck with his so-called research in hopes of gaining something other than information for Konoha that was carnal in origin. Sure, Jiraiya was a pervert, but that didn't mean he spent every waking moment thinking perverted thoughts and tried to get into numerous sticky situations. Of course not, he only spent 23 hours of the day doing so. Feel free to face fault here. It wasn't that he meant to cause so much chaos, it was just that he didn't know any better. Jiraiya was always broken inside. Going from being an orphan, to the forgotten student, and then solely the legendary pervert of the Sannin. He was always the forgotten one, for he never had the intelligence or recognition of Orochimaru nor the heritage or charm of Tsunade. Like Naruto, Iruka, Anko, and the Yondaime, Jiraiya had done many stupid things just to get attention in hopes of getting recognized by someone beyond being Tsunade and or Orochimaru's teammate. And the cause of all of these problems lay with how he had ruined exactly 5 Squad 7s, his own under the Shadaime and Nadaime, the Sannin squad, the Yondaime's squad, Kakashi's team, and finally the 5th, Naruto's. All of these squads had been connected through a student-turned-sensei. A student absorbs everything that is shown to them by their sensei, so it is only fitting that the arrogance and idealism of Sasuke Sarutobi was the cause for so many ruined lives. Though the Uchiha massacre was unavoidable, Sarutobi could have sent the last loyal Uchiha for treatment, but instead had him live as if nothing happened under the occasional eye of Kakashi Hatake. It is no wonder why Sasuke became so power-hungry with someone like Kakashi as his sensei, for geniuses are their own worst enemies, a lesson that would be learned the hard way by Konoha. The difference of one shinobi. Meanwhile, the third and final member of the legendary Sannin was also experiencing bad luck. For he had first lost his apprentice Anko, and now his latest batch of experiments had resulted in no survivors. This was a first, for at least one individual always made it past the initial testing. And he knew that this was bad luck, for the subjects were chosen from specific bloodlines for specific purposes. Now Orochimaru was used to using countless lives in his twisted experiments in his quest for mastering all jutsus and obtaining immortality, but to have not a single living test subject out of a pool of 50 souls was something different for him. He was having a bad week, and he knew someone had done something stupid that indirectly concerned him, but he let it quickly slip to the back of his mind. His assistant Kabuto had come with great news. No matter what the good news was, he was still angry how his bad luck had messed up everything that he had worked so hard to plan. First, his apprentice Anko was one of the first to survive his cursed seal. It was such a shame that he had lost someone with great potential, but now he had lost the first batch who he had tried harnessing the power of the cursed seal. And even worse was that he couldn't find that cute little boy that had been keeping him company. Said boy had sneezed loudly, alerting the sound shinobi of his presence, and once again the chase was on. The poor boy, nowhere even near 8 years old, began running for his life. He would never return to Orochimaru, the infamous snake pedophile. It was known everywhere that Orochimaru was a crazed mass murderer, twisted scientist, but somehow his pedophilic tendencies were never discussed in his native village, so now said child from Konoha was fleeing for his life. Little did Orochimaru know, but he had just been double-crossed. The boy's name was Sai and he would forever be scared by the events that had recently unfolded. His superior Danzo assured him that everything would be fine and that he should do everything that Orochimaru asked, but the snake Sanin had gone too far and now Sai was seriously considering becoming a nuke and missing nin. It was better than being offered to gay pedophiles. No one would realize until much later that the origin with Sai's constant mentioning, depictions of penises originated with the weakest of the three Sanin, Orochimaru. Anko Mitarashi was a kunoichi that never backed down and was not afraid of speaking her mind. That was what initially drew her to him. And to top it off, she had been recently orphaned when he decided to take her on as an apprentice years prior to the Kyuubi's attack on Konoha, which should be blamed on the Uchiha, but that is another story. Anko's determination, fetish for blood, and ruthlessness reminded Orochimaru much of his own childhood, early career. Anko was in such a fragile state when he first met that he had faced no problems manipulating her into a personal weapon. He was a precious person that she was ready to defend even if it cost her life. Anko was one of the only dedicated kunoichi of her generation. More were interested with impressing boys that were also shinobi hopefuls. Anko solely wanted to help defend her village and make her parents proud. And then one day his world started crumbling down around him at an alarming rate and he had decided it would much easier to abandoning her. Initially he thought she would become a sleeper agent for his new village, well soon to be established village in rice fields country. Unfortunately he didn't realize that her undying loyalty had disappeared almost instantly after hearing of his sick experiments and abandoning her. Initially he told young Anko that her cursed seal was a symbol of her apprenticeship, which it was originally, a gift to enhance her skills, but later she saw it as a curse. Unlike the other seals which had major drawbacks, Anko's curse seal was much more primitive, but performer much better. Konoha for some reason had decided to preserve the remains of the deceased Hokages in a tomb, whose only entrance lay within the basement of the Hokage Tower. The bodies were laid in a tomb that very few were even privileged enough to know existed, even fewer knew where the entrance lay. Somehow Orochimaru had gained the necessary knowledge and had acquired sufficient amounts of DNA samples from only the Shidaime, mostly Hairyu perverts. Closing parenthesis. He completely ignored the body of the Nidaime, and didn't even notice the Yondaimes, for it was hidden by seals and genjutsu that not even Tsunade, Orochimaru, and Jiraiya combined would be even able to make a dent on. Orochimaru had also gained DNA samples from the Shidaime's descendants, Nawaki and Tsunade, however neither had sufficient amounts of the genes necessary for the legendary Mokuden bloodline, though no such thing existed. The bloodline of the Koichi clan lay not with wood, but water. By now Orochimaru had already discovered the proper regulations and protocol in order to perform successful experiments that involved injecting bloodlines into other individuals. The existence of the cursed seals was enough proof of that. However, Orochimaru had moved on to bigger and better things this time around. He was now attempting to recreate the Shidaime's Mokuden ability to create wood release, a feat that could not even be matched by the shinobi in grass country. They can control plants, often vines, but their control over trees are much more limited than that of the Shidaime Hokage. He had little interest in water release ever, so he never thought to add 2 and 2 together. If he had, he would realized what the secret of the Koichi clan was and would have been able to so. Eventually he would succeed, but not to his knowledge, for he would be forced to flee and leave all of the deceased subjects behind. The difference of one shinobi. Now we will once again focus on one of our favorite blonde shinobi. In this case Washi is making the journey to the land of lightning, specifically the Hidden Cloud Village, which was not easy for the young shinobi. He was a living reminder of someone who had paid the ultimate price, forever forced to live a life suffering much like the Yondaime. His resemblance to the Yondaime was only outclassed by that of young Naruto Uzumaki, who he was currently masquerading as to the Kumo Nin. However, this young man had a chance of redemption, for the Raikage had plenty of things in store for him as soon as he arrived in Kumo. The Hidden Cloud Village was always a bit unorthodox compared to the other 4 hidden villages of the 5 great shinobi countries. Many of the village's best shinobi and secrets had never stepped outside of the great village in the centuries of its existence. The price of sacrifice is always much more than one initially suspects. No matter if one is optimistic or pessimistic, it doesn't matter, for sacrifice always come with a price. And to protect loved ones, the ultimate price must be paid. The shinobi nations were like academy students, constantly replacing friends in exchange for ones with better toys. The hidden villages of the 5 great elemental nations were currently Iwa Kumo vs. Konoha Suna. Though Konoha and Suna were not on the best terms, as Konoha had wiped out a large portion of Suna's creme de la creme. Kiri was in the middle of dark times, then none of the other 4 great nations were interested intervening in the civil war, though Iwa, Suna, and Konoha were no longer trading with the Land of Water. The Land of Lightning had not completely severed ties with its long-standing ally, but was not in a position where they could do much more than continue trading and sending the occasional few squads to help keep some of the major ports open and out of the hands of people like Gato. The current Mizukage was a corrupt fellow that held an iron fist within the Land of Water, but the ports were completely out of his control and would continue to stay out of that way. And with the tides changing from day to day, even these long-standing alliances are temporary at best until someone else became a bigger threat. Every nation was currently at this time scrambling for alliances, despite one of the great shinobi wars was in the process of ending, a sign that a new war was on the horizon. A nation is only as strong as its shinobi and the alliances it holds. Though the terms had already been settled, many repercussions were still being felt and dealt with on a daily basis. The Raikage could not be happier. He had received word from the squad that was dispatched to Hidden Leaf Village that they had obtained the container of the infamous Kyuubi. He would be the most powerful Kage of them all. Currently his only competition was the Sandaime Hokage of the Land of Fire and the unofficial Kages for the countries of Rain and Grass. The Yondaime Kage's power was being cut by the Wind Daimyo cutting his annual budget. The Land of Water was in an era of rebellion that would not cease. The Land of Earth was still feeling the aftermath of the Third Great Shinobi War. The Rokudaime Raikage was in a very happy mood, for he would soon be in control of 2 of the infamous tailed beasts. Of the 9, one existed on its own, the 3-tailed water beast, one was in the possession of Suna, the 1-tailed raccoon dog, one was already in Kumo, the 2-tailed cat, and the Kyuubi was on its way to him. Several nations had claimed to be in the possession of several of the beasts, but he knew better. The Yondaime Raikage was a more brilliant man than many men had pegged him for. While many thought he was a pedophile taking in children for his own person pleasures, the Raikage was not as bad of a person as he was portrayed. Yes, he did give into his carnal pleasures with some of the teenagers, and past the age of consent, but none against their will, and it was all done in private and under the utmost of security. He did not take advantage of them, ironically it was the other way around. They took advantage of his kind heart. He was more interested into giving orphans bright futures than what others thought of him. His reputation was not a concern of his, for he only cared about making his nation greater than ever before. So far he had given birth to several legends of the village by following this personal mission of his. Despite his faults, the Rokudaime Raikage was well respected, for he had led his village through dark times and had led the longest of any of the previous Raikage. He had brought a new sense of hope to the village that had not been felt since the times of the Nadaime and Sandaime. History is always written by the victor, thus history is always biased and inaccurate. This particular Raikage had produced numerous remarkable shinobi as a result of his unorthodox training regime, none more memorable than Yugito Ni, the vessel of the 2-tailed cat. He would rather people believe he was a pedophile than a soft-hearted man interested in raising the overlooked and abused into the most unpredictable and most dependable shinobi of the elemental nations. The difference of one shinobi. Meanwhile in Konoha, the Sandaime Hokage was once again stuck in his office at his desk behind 3 piles of paperwork that reached the seals that lay hidden throughout the office's ceiling. During the last few months it had never been worse. He had never seen this much paperwork in all of the time he was Hokage before he had stepped down. He would have killed the Yondaime Hokage if possible. The Yondaime was the only one that had ever been able to escape the burden that is paperwork, though the Shadaime dealt with very little due to the village being relatively new and unorganized. The incident with the Hyuga had caused an insane amount of paperwork that never seemed to end. The whole ordeal was solved very easily, almost too easily. And that is when he glanced into his crystal ball to observe his honorable grandson, Naruto Uzumaki. Instead of seeing the blonde ball of energy eating ramen or muttering about how villagers were attacking him, the boy was singing a different tune. It was a scene he would never forget, something that would haunt him to his dying moments and to the afterlife. Kami, why did he have to go away? He was my only friend and he came every single day. Not even the lazy old man comes to see me every day. Old man has some explaining to do. Naruto just sat there in the dimly lit room that was barely up to health codes. Why did Anbu-san leave? He made me feel safe. He was the only one that didn't make me feel like a monster. The old man doesn't anything but give me money and take me for ramen. Sarutobi was definitely intrigued. One of his Anbu had actually interacted with Naruto despite the explicit orders to solely protect him from the villagers. He wished he could have done more, but the council would have stopped him. Sometimes he felt guilty for not trying harder, but most of the time he was too concerned about catching up with his favorite X-rated collection of smut housed within in an orange book. Paperwork is always a cage's enemy, but especially one that is constantly spying on the bathhouses via his crystal ball and reading his students' perverted books. Even worse than that was that Naruto had begun to see through everything as it truly was. Sarutobi hoped that this was truly just anger, and not Naruto thinking with a clear mind. Washi-sensei, Washi is eagle in Japanese, was the only who would play with me. He always took care of my injuries and would read me stories. Why Kami? Why does everyone that cares about me have to leave? I don't even know who my parents were. Washi-san was the closest thing I had to family and you had to take it away. Why? Naruto snuggled with a stuffed animal in his arms under a blanket covered with eagles and dragons. The blanket was one of the first things he was given by Washi-sensei besides the stuffed eagle, which Naruto named Washi-chan, and a scroll of special jutsu that Naruto would not be able to open until an undisclosed time in the future. Each of the items Washi-sensei gave him were special and he treated them better than Jiraiya and his research, Tsunade and her sake winnings, Orochimaru with an innocent boy, and Kakashi with a new Ika book. Naruto was trying to hold back the tears. It was the first time in a long time that the Anbu had not been there to tuck in the demon vessel. The Anbu had filled in the role of an older sibling, parent to the young orphan, a role that the Hokage had not even bothered to try to fill. While he truly felt bad for Naruto, he began to take less and less care of him. And as he began to see Naruto less often, the paperwork seemed to triple. For the villagers, civilian and shinobi alike, saw this a sign as the Sandaime was beginning to hate the Kyuubi brat as much as they did. It was a truly horrible fact, but Sasuke Sarutobi began to give into his perverted side more and more instead of taking care of his charge. The Sandaime always ranted about how much the Yondaime would be disappointed with everyone, but it would be his student Kakashi, and his colleague Sarutobi, that he would be most disappointed with. The old man did not hate Naruto, or think he was the Kyuubi, but he did start to simply not care anymore. The difference of one shinobi. Little did the Hokage know, but the entire happy-go-lucky facade was just a charade. Everyone knew Naruto was Konoha's most unpredictable ninja, but no one though, not even the Sandaime, was able to see through all of false smiles and elaborate pranks. Everyone knew that he did pranks for fun, and a few saw that it was a desperate cry for attention, but almost no one saw the real reason he did so. In truth, it was how he honed his skills and proved that he would be a force to be reckoned with. It was his manner of practicing future strategies. He did not have the patience or a partner to play Shugi or Go. Naruto was smarter than he let on, but in no way was he on par with Shikamaru Nara. Naruto was underestimated and underappreciated, yet another reason why he chose to don his mask of an idiot throughout the village, even to the Hokage, Iruka, and Tuki Inuyame from the ramen stand. The closest he came to being himself was to the Anbu that took care of him, his first precious person, Washi-sensei. That was not to say that Naruto was depressed or cynical, but he wasn't the stupid kid that always smiled no matter what. Naruto only acted like that and played pranks to gain attention and acknowledgement. However, that would never happen. Not even his future Genin sensei would ever see him more than the demon vessel and the boy who took away his sensei's life. His teammates were a brooding genius that was nothing special, and a kunoichi with little chakra, excellent chakra control, insane strength, the intelligence of a crayon, a short temper, and a split personality that was more frightening than Tsunade going after Jiraiya. The first was someone who belonged in an asylum, but as the last of his clan the council deemed creating a capable shinobi able in continuing his bloodline more important than seeking treatment. For you see, Sasuke was scared by the murder of his clan, but for what he didn't know was almost the entire clan minus his mother, brother, and himself were involved in a plot to overthrow the Hokage, eliminate the Hyuga, and create a coup d'état. The kunoichi on the other hand was not very special except in her mastery of RFG-ism, rabid fan girl syndrome. She came from a clan of shinobi, but her family posed as civilian for years. A family whose ties no longer lay with Konoha. Not even Orochimaru had committed as many unspeakable acts as that clan of pink-hair banshees. Sakura was always arrogant, stubborn, and awkward around males, a perfect explanation for her time on Squad 7. His second squad would show some progress though. The absence of the two Sharingan users created a better place for growth in general. The air of favoritism that once ran thick constantly was almost non-existent. Each of the students learned something and gained much from the experience. Though Naruto seemed to grab a fair share of attention, the other two realized how much he needed it socially and for his future. Naruto needed acknowledgement and to be pointed in the right direction. The pitiful kunoichi still was there, but her potential was greater and her temper had slightly mellowed. The introduction of a stoic painter from Root had made little improvement, but it did allow Naruto to grow emotionally. The Junin in charge, however, was another story. Yamato was the sole reason that Naruto showed any progress besides his training with Jiraiya. Yamato's possession of the Shadaime's Mokudan abilities and Biju, taming, abilities had greatly strengthened Naruto's use of the Kyuubi's chakra. While there was a small air of favoritism in his attempts at helping Naruto with chakra control and taming the Kyuubi, it was understandable, for he needed the most work of the three. Every member of the squad was an equal in making decisions. But every good thing must come to an end. While Kakashi had solely focused on the Uchiha, taught a few techniques and exercises to the kunoichi, well enough to get her out of his head for reading porn in public and being later, he had solely taught the tree climbing exercise to Naruto. Despite all of these so-called mistakes, he had managed to create a sense of team unity, albeit a very temporary and weak one. Yamato may have not taught any of them in particular many abilities, but the three members of his squad grew until his leadership in a manner that made Guy and Lee triple their daily routines to stay ahead. Naruto and Sai in particular had gained something important under the tutelage of Yamato, something that would forever change their outlook and success in the future. The former in potential as a shinobi and the later as a human being. Without Yamato, Naruto would still be a clueless shinobi with few skills and horrible chakra control. On the other hand, Sai would still be an emotionless lapdog to Danzo, but instead he had become a human that began to question everything and appreciate the little things. Sai still had a long way to go, but he did learn no to always voice one's opinions about others when you don't have anything nice to say about them. The difference of one shinobi. Sarutobi could not even bear to watch the rest of the scene unfolding before him. He knew he could do nothing for Homura, Koharu, Danzo, and the council would be even more determined to eliminate Naruto if they felt his personal feelings were clouding his judgment. Part of him felt as if he were betraying his close friend the fourth and his son legacy Naruto. Another part of him felt like giving into the demands of the populace and once again become popular throughout the village. However, it was not a matter he would take lightly, for his decision would forever change the Land of Fire, and maybe even the entire shinobi continent. It was under this condition that the Sandaime had made several rash decisions he would later forget. He did most of those things out of the goodness of his heart in an attempt to do the proper thing, but as Hokage he had to put the best interest of the village ahead his personal agenda, even if it meant subjecting an unsung hero to years of physical abuse and mental trauma that would forever change him. That child would memorize each and every face that attacked and would remember each event with vivid, no graphic details that made Ibiki's Morino look like a puppy. The child would have his revenge sure enough, but not in a way anyone would expect. The Sandaime Hokage, Sasuke Sarutobi, was too much of an optimist to be Hokage. That fact alone would lead to his death by the hand of a former student. Now the question to answer is who this Washi-sensei was. There were several Anbu members with avian masks, most of them Hyuga. The Uchiha tended to have feline masks, but to recall who they were took a great amount of effort, for unless he met with them on a frequent basis it was unlikely he knew who they were. Many Anbu masks in the village. The eagle mask could also be a genjutsu hiding their true identity or a random mask. I am glad someone cares for Naruto, but at the same time they openly disobeyed orders. This job is so bothersome, I could really use a new book by Jiraiya. All of this paperwork is driving me insane, the Sandaime thought as he sighed and then blew into his pipe. He knew that tobacco wasn't good for his health, as was sake, but he had made it this far in life. He would address that problem when he came across it. There were many reasons why it would be futile to learn the identity of the eagle-masked Anbu, for despite all of the protocol and decrees they had broken by coming into contact with Naruto on a daily basis instead of just guarding him from afar, they had turned Naruto from a scared little boy to one with hope in his eyes and a brighter outlook on life. Naruto still was not as happy as the mask he wore let on, but it was an improvement, at least now he had someone to live for. Sarutobi didn't know whether to pay said Anbu a large sum of money or lock them in a cell with Ibiki and Anko, when she is PMSing, for several days. Nevertheless, it was too late to do anything, for the only record of Anbu masks and their users only revealed the identities of deceased shinobi and kunoichi. For it would not be wise to blatantly list anywhere which individual was which Anbu member, at least while still living. He, Sarutobi, hoped for his own sake and the fate of the village that this Washi-sensei would be found. He may even be as so generous to avoid execution for crimes or treason for disobeying his rules just to ensure that Naruto maintained his sanity, but this option didn't look too promising, for he did not remember even having an eagle in Anbu. Regardless, the only person who would know had been sworn to secrecy many years ago. It was part of a now long forgotten memory. It was an unspoken rule that no one, not even the Hokage, knew the identities of an Anbu unless he, or later in Tsunade's case she, personally chose them or they revealed themselves to the Hokage. It was a rule decided upon by the Nadaime Hokage in order to protect the identities and lives of those that sacrificed themselves to protect the village. Though it was imperfect, the revealed identities post-mortem could still potentially lead to harm for the families of those deceased shinobi and kunoichi. The idea of the actual masks was adapted from the land of water, where they created the masks from the abundant supply of clay from the shores of the archipelago. Other villages made attempts to craft the masks themselves, but the minerals in the water's clay were unrivaled. While the masks themselves were crafted in uniformity with nothing more than the two standard eye holes, each and every single of them were unique, even before the characteristics of animals were incorporated with the chakra of the craftsmen of the various villages. Everyone believes the shinobi chooses the mask, but in reality it is the mask that chooses the shinobi. Harry Potter fans out there. Does this sound familiar? Lol. Sorry I have digressed. The difference of one shinobi. Meanwhile, a certain blonde was beginning to regret leaving Konoha. He knew that, as an orphan, there was little hope for him to climb up the ranks of shinobi. Very few even became genin to begin with. Even fewer made it to rank of chunin. It was almost unheard of for one to become a junin, hunter nin, or anbu. And in the history of Konoha only one has become Hokage, though that isn't too bad statistically either. Who needs statistics in a world where one wrong move can cost you your life? Always look underneath and never underestimate your opponent. Individuals like Yamato and Anko were exceptions, both special in their own rights. While the former became famous in Anbu, as well as his skills with wood release, the unique talent he only shared with none other than the Shadaime Hokage, the later became an infamous special Junin and also an integral part of ANBU's interrogation and torture unit. Both of their lives were forever changed by the same man, a man who dared to change destiny and fate, a man who tried to cheat death on several occasions, none other than the infamous Snake Sanin and infamous Konoha missing nin, Orochimaru, yet another of Konoha's infamous orphan shinobi that rose to greatness. There are always exceptions to the rule, that's why there are generalizations and outliers. Children from shinobi families, clans have the advantage for they have been subconsciously absorbing shinobi knowledge and skills from the time they were born. And also they would continue to be educated for the rest of their lives to some extent. But for genin from civilian families or orphan genin, generally there was little hope to get past even chunin. While he regretted leaving Naruto alone, he knew this experience would force both of them to grow stronger by abandoning everything that they once held dear to their hearts. Hopefully Anko-chan and Ibiki-kun keep an eye on him, or else Konoha will cease to exist. Those stupid villagers, civilian and shinobi alike, refuse to see what is in front of them. If they are not careful, Naruto will truly become the demon the fear, for he will break down mentally and allow the Kyuubi to corrupt his young, impressionable mind. If only Sensei could see them now, he would truly massacre this village. Even the Sandaime has been guilty in regards with the abuse. What kind of idiot announces to the village that Naruto has the Kyuubi sealed within him if it's too dangerous to reveal whom his father is? That is an even more dangerous fact. Stone would love to get their hands on a Jinchuriki, even better one that is the infamous Yellow Flash's son. I understand that you did what you thought was best, Sensei, but why? The Kyuubi has forever ruined both of your lives. Yours was cut tragically short to save the village, and Naruto is forced to live a life not even Stone would wish upon you, the man that decimated their country. Torture to that magnitude is not even as extreme as the worst torture that Ibiki and Anko dish at their victims. I mean, suspects were the final thoughts before the blonde took a final glance of Fire Country and continuing with the envoy of Kumo Nin on towards the land of lightning and eventually to the Raikage himself in the village hidden in the clouds, Kumogakure. The cat-eyed blonde Kunoichi that had been left in charge of the Kyuubi vessel, eyed the child with what he perceived as compassion. Washi was willing to admit that he looked younger than he was, but what did she think he was? A 5-year-old. The subtle smile she gave him before turning back to the rest of her squad left Washi with even more questions. Something deep down told the Kunoichi that there was something fishy with the entire situation. And no, we are not talking about the salmon she smelled from his breath, no, there was something that just wasn't adding up here. 2 years after founding of Konoha. The village that my brother and myself have settled in this barren stretch of land has grown and thrived. My Mokuton wood release and his water release abilities have allowed a thriving forest and a sparkling river to appear in the middle of nowhere, a region where once no man dared to live for the lack of water and shade. My special ability of controlling the wood element is similar yet different than the nomadic people in a distant land near a great desert. In our journeys we have come across many people, and they learned a great deal from many of them. We have already had 2 clans with Dojutsu bloodline limits join our newly formed village. Their clan members have quickly joined our ranks, though my brother and myself in particular dislike those with the red and black eyes. Neither clan seems to fond of helping anyone other than those of their blood, though I am not surprised, for if I were in either of their positions I would feel the same after being turned on once again and again by those I thought I could trust. Though the lavender and white-eyed ones are no much better than the other clan, but at least they do not always let their person views cloud their judgment like the other clan, which has already begun to unjustly steal the techniques of others instead of doing the honorable thing and asking others to teach them to them. They are already growing egos the size of the continent. We are beginning to regret inviting them to join us, for they are causing nothing but trouble in the village. Maybe they will become of some use to the village sooner or later. Those of the white-eyed clan have already proved to be invaluable when it comes to protecting the village. However, we have come across another, one that is to be feared and to be admired. Lan Lu Mu, literally stormy green eye, Midorigan, green eye. The Midorigan is not a dojutsu as expected by its name, though manifestation of the trait is identified by a change in the appearance of the user's eyes. The name of this particular bloodline limit only refers to what happens with the use of this bloodline limit in the aesthetic sense. It is quite different from the other dojutsu we have come across so far. Again, I note that the Midorigan is not a dojutsu but shares similarities with Konoha's dojutsu, the Sharingan and the Byakugan. It may seem trivial for me to repeat this, but it is important to avoid any possible confusion at this point. Any attempts to locate a dojutsu user will fail while search for a Midorigan user, for they are essentially one with nature. This is a very trivial matter, but one must pay close attention. The Midorigan only uses the eyes to signify it has become awakened. They cannot be transferred to other shinobi like the Byakugan. Both bloodlines' eyes can only become active with the blood of the user. Not even relatives can use eyes. Civilians, however, can use the eyes as long no chakra is funneled into the eyes at shinobi levels. The Midori and Byaku-eyed clans have done so several times as to help those who have helped them rebuild after devastation, though in the case of the later only branch family members' eyes were donated. A shinobi attempting to wield and activate a bloodline with the eyes of a former Midorigan or Byakugan wielder will be struck down immediately. It is an eye ability like the other two in the sense that the user's eye changes in appearance when the bloodline is activated, though once activated the Midorigan stays constantly active, and does not require chakra to be pumped into the eyes or hand seals to be used. Time and time again several lands have recorded this remarkable ability as a dojutsu, for it is unlike any other ability known in the shinobi continent. It has been misclassified as a dojutsu in the sense that its activation is mirrored by a change in the user's eyes, but the change in the eyes is only the manifestation of the control over sand, wood, and ice becoming active. The Midorigan isn't as chakra draining or physically harmful as the other two bloodline abilities, but does have a toll on the body. I know that I am repeating that this is not a dojutsu, but of all of the information I have come across on this ability, it's always mislabels this clan's ability. Some old habits just do not die. So I hope by repeating it enough times this error will be corrected. This ability is unrivaled in raw potential. While the possibilities of the Midorigan seem endless, their elemental control is not the same as if they had the natural affinities as others. The Midorigan users appear to have a nature affinity, which allows them to control all of the elements to some degree. These individuals have dual or sometimes triple affinities that allow them to create the sub-elements, which are enhanced by their bloodline. In a sense, they have multiple affinities, primary elements and the secondary ones they create. However, every great power has limits to keep it in check. The family that controls this wondrous gift was once a great clan, but their numbers have dwindled after numerous attempts of kidnappings. The clan is in such a state that they simply do not have enough members to be called anything more than a family. They were never a big clan, but they were always the first to give a helping hand. It is sad that their favors are almost never returned. The Midorigan is a jutsu-enhancing bloodline limit that amplifies certain qualities of an individual's chakra, specifically water, earth, and wind, These three elements form the divine trinity. For water cleanses, earth grows, and wind restores balance. Lightning and fire tend to work against the chakra working of this limit, for fire burns and lightning destroys. The stormy green eye, the stormy bit, is an added description to this limit, as a kekkei genkai that focuses on using one's chakra to take advantage of the environment while in battle. While most limits rely solely on the user's own chakra, this limit relies both on the wielder's chakra and sources of nature. While the appearance of the eye may change, the eyes do not gain any extra abilities, as in the Byakugan and Sharingan. The eyes are solely a subtle sign that it has been activated. While the Byakugan and Sharingan tend to only be activated in battle, the Midorigan always remains activated. However, lightning and fire can be incorporated in a sense. For fire will strengthen earth to form stone or metal, will cause water to become a gas, and will be amplified by wind. Lightning, on the other hand, also helps earth form stone or metal, and makes water and wind more deadly with its addition. The nature affinity of this Midorigan users is what makes them capable of being the guardians of the earth. For of the 10 elements, the Midorigan utilizes 9, the most of any ability out there. The 10 elements are as follows: earth, fire, lightning, water, wind, ice, sand, wood, plant, metal, light, and shadow, darkness, void. The Midorigan is able to control all of these elements except for shadow. There are 4 categories. The first 5 elements are the primary elements, the next 3 are the secondary elements, the 9th is the tertiary element, and the 10th is the final element. The Midorigan is responsible for health, water, strength, earth, and spirit, wind. While a person born with the Midorigan, it can only be utilized to its fullest with a double or triple affinity of water, earth, and/or wind. That is why it is important the bloodline tends to activate if the individual does not maintain a fire or lightning chakra affinity, at least as their primary one. It is difficult enough to obtain 2 chakra affinities, 3 is much more difficult. It is next to impossible to only have the necessary chakra affinity types for this limit to become active. Inherent control over 2 or more of these chakra types, water, earth, and wind, activates the first level. Being born with the genetic predisposition for this bloodline trait does not guarantee it will be passed down or activated. While many shinobi can master jutsu of a wide variety, it takes time to master a second affinity. By doing so, stage 1 is activated. The iris of the eye becomes a vibrant green and the pupil also becomes silver in males. Stage 1's strengths, weaknesses, and uses vary depending on which 2 affinities have been obtained together. Water and earth give the user better judgment. Their strength is quadrupled, making the superhuman strength frightening. The symbiotic combination of elements creates a situation where the user can absorb chakra from their opponent's chakra and combine it with their own to speed up their process of their recovery. This technique physically manifests itself on the user when not active. While the healing powers seem wonderful, the downside to this type is that those with water and earth chakra infused together become quite emotional. Their photographic memory often comes back to haunt them. This is usually exhibited in medic nin. This dual affinity does not guarantee the user will be able to wield Mokudan, wood release, abilities. Earth and wind gives the user increased stamina and increases evasiveness. This opposing combination of brute force and grace increases the damage of physical damage dealt by the user, but also allows the user to move like sand. The synergy of this reaction causes unpredictable movement and cat-like reflexes. Despite the individual contributions, the user become quite hot-headed and can easily become agitated. The downfall of this style is that this combination of chakra is not one where it's easy to find a happy medium and can cause the user to become mentally unstable to most people. This is usually exhibited in taijutsu specialists. This dual affinity does not guarantee the user will be able to wield Sunadan, sand release, abilities. Wind and water gives the users obtain a clearer mind and sharper accuracy. The user of this combo also becomes quite unpredictable, but in a planned manner. The benefit of this combination is a fierce strategic mind and an unforgiving attitude. The results are that once they have been wrong, they will do nothing short of getting their revenge and then some. While they may come off as strange and cold to some, they also are expressed as being refreshing and gentle. The only con to this particular stage of the Midorigan is that the user will continue to push their limits in order to protect their loved ones and prove others wrong even if it costs them their lives. This dual affinity does not guarantee the user will be able to wield Hyouden, ice release, abilities. Stage 2 of the Midorigan is achieved when the third and final element of the Divine Trinity is mastered. By defending a precious person from death, the third stage is activated. With the third stage, males gain several rings of dark green throughout the irises of their eyes, while an upside-down white triangle appears in the pupil of females. This stage unlocks the full potential for abilities for Mokuden, wood release, Hyouden, ice release, and Sunaden, sand release. Note: while sand is often utilized in wind jutsus, sand is its own sub-element as are wood and ice. Wood is technically divided between my Mokuden abilities and the plant-wielding abilities of others. I fear for the safety of Konoha that the Midorigan outlasts the feud that has already begun between the Hyuga and Uchiha. I hope that all of this was not done in vain, for both families have come from nothing to instant fortune rather quickly, but they have not changed. They are still greedy and arrogant individuals. End of entry. The difference of one shinobi. Skip down several entries. The difference of one shinobi. 3 years after founding of Konoha. I have no first-hand witness that potential exhibited by one that possessed the power that is the stormy green eye, or Midorigan. My brother and myself have witnessed the manifestation of the first 2 stages, but just recently we had learned of the third and final stage. The final stage of this bloodline involves the final, 9th element, metal. This is the final element that can be controlled under the use of the Midorigan, but there is a 10th element out there that is wielded to some degree by the Nara, Yamanaka, and the Sarutobi. The metal release, or Midorigan, is a frightening force to be reckoned with. But for this stage to be activated, one has to be impaled by a significantly large amount of metal. The importance of metal in the Midorigan is that it uses the electric properties of metal to counteract the Byakugan's view of chakra pathways. It also uses reflective nature of metal to reflect any attempt at predictions of movement or hand seals, thus protecting any jutsu performed by the Midorigan users, thus also rendering the Sharingan useless against this bloodline. But to hold it in check, only those of pure heart can activate their bloodline. Metal release combines aspects of all 5 elements, though earth, lightning, and fire chakra are what one would assume would all that needs to activate metal, but all 5 are needed for metal to be made from chakra, as air and water also play roles in the formation of metal. This final stage of the Midorigan is not done without great sacrifice. While the healing properties of the earth-water duality are inherent, there is damage that cannot be healed. The use of metal techniques literally tears apart the chakra pathways of both the user and the victim. Not even the regenerative powers of Biju would be able to heal the damage inflicted upon the user with frequent use of metal release techniques. With a heavy heart I have witnessed the consequences of the Midorigan, for it is what has saved my life. The individual in question was a faithful individual that always looked on the bright side no matter what. His dark beginning led to nothing but to an exterior of a sunny blonde that never knew the meaning of quitting, a facade that fooled many, but not me. The crystal that I famously wear contains the essence of the Midorigan. He said it would tame Bijus, and sure enough it has. I hope this necklace will serve its purpose for many generations. Shadaime Hokage. December 6th. End of scroll. Author's note. Does the blonde mentioned by the Shadaime Hokage sound familiar? Lol. There is a reason why the Midorigan users are blonde and green-eyed smiley face. The difference of one shinobi. Elementary elemental explanations. Hokage Tower Archives. 5th bookcase of restricted section, 3rd shelf from the top, 10th book from the right. In this world there are 10 elements in existence. They are divided into 4 categories, though a few fit more than one. The primary elements are earth, fire, lightning, water, and wind. The secondary elements are ice, sand, and wood. The tertiary element is metal. And the final element that is composed of the rest is shadow. The primary elements. The primary elements are exactly what they are called for the most part. They are the building blocks of the world. These elements are split into two groups, the Trinity and the Duo. The Trinity is made up of earth, water, and wind. These three elements compose the majority of the world we know and spawn the most of the elements. Earth and water spawn wood. Water and wind spawn ice. Wind and earth spawn sand. Fire, like the elements of the Trinity, also fills a large portion of the world. Lightning, on the other hand, is technically a secondary element, though it can exist on its own, because it is a manifestation of fire in the sky, wind, but is a primary element because it can form other elements. The chakra cycle can be viewed in two particular ways. The first cycle, generating elements. Lightning summons winds in a storm, wind adds fuel to a fire, fire burns the earth creates plants through the water, and water conducts lightning. Lightning, wind, fire, earth, water, lightning. In this cycle, lightning is defeated by wind, wind is defeated by fire, fire is defeated by earth is defeated by water, water is defeated by lightning, and the cycle continues. However, this cycle is flawed, for fire should be overcome by water, not earth, and in turn water should be overcome by earth, and then earth overcome by lightning. Lightning, wind, fire, water, earth, lightning. This cycle should be described by: lightning summons winds in a storm, wind adds fuel to a fire, fire is cancelled by water, water creates plants with the earth, and earth absorbs lightning. The difference of one shinobi. The second cycle, overcoming elements. Fire is empowered by wind. Wind blows away lightning. Lightning is cancelled by the earth. Earth absorbs water. Water douses fire. Fire, wind, lightning, earth, water, fire. In this cycle, fire defeats wind. Wind defeats lightning. Lightning defeats earth defeats water, water defeats fire, and the cycle continues. However, upon closer inspection, one would think that wind would defeat earth, which would in turn defeat lightning. Even after all of my experience, I still don't understand this concept, which is used in battle. The overcoming cycle theoretically should be fire, wind, earth, lightning, water, fire. This cycle theoretically should be described by: fire is empowered by wind. Wind blows away earth. Earth absorbs lightning. Lightning vaporizes water. Water douses fire. As demonstrated before, it is difficult to classify anything, for not everything adheres to the rule. No matter which system is used, and I believe the original cycles, those I listed first for both the generating and overcoming cycles, will continue to be accepted, for they have been so for hundreds of years. Nadaime Hokage. June 25. The difference of one shinobi. Skip down several passages within the same entry. The difference of one shinobi. The entire concept of elements is confusing already without the division into sub-elements. Using the four classical elements established by the Shadaime Mizukage, the elements break down as follows: wind, lightning 1, and wood 2. Earth, sand, and metal. Fire, lightning 1, and shadow. Water, ice, and wood 2. 1. In the first case, lightning falls under wind in the concept of a storm. Lightning arrives with clouds already in the vicinity. Clouds are a manifestation of air, so lightning falls under wind. On the other hand, lightning mirrors fire in its unpredictability and general behavior. 2. In the first case, wood is controlled by wind for its connection with oxygen. Air overcomes earth as does wood, so in that sense wood is partially air. In the other example, wood is water because plants contain a large amount of water, especially swamp-type plants. The difference of one shinobi. The 12 hand seals correspond with specific elements according the zodiac. Despite the elemental correlations certain hand seals have with specific elemental chakra type, that does not mean their frequency must correspond. For example, the tiger seal is used quite often in fire release jutsu, but it technically falls under the jurisdiction of the element of wood. Earth. Also sand cattle representation. Ox fixed element. Dragon, rat, ox. Fire. Cattle representation. Ram fixed element. Snake, horse, ram. Water. Cattle representation. Pig fixed element. Pig, rat, ox. Wood also wind and lightning cattle representation. Dog fixed element. Tiger, hare, dragon. Metal. Also ice and shadow cattle representation. Bird fixed element. Monkey, bird, dog. Wind. Sea wood. Lightning, sea wood. Ice. Sea metal. Sand. Sea earth. Shadow. Sea metal. The difference of one shinobi. As I have discussed before, there are several interpretations of the elements as we as a collective group have discovered throughout the shinobi continent. Most of these teachings seem to have originated thousands of years ago, though the documents we have found only seem a few hundred years old at most. It seems that these teachings continued to be spread for many centuries. Each of these cycles varies from the one currently implemented with chakra, though we do not know why they vary the way we do. Element cycles. A. 4-element cycle. Wind, fire, earth, water. In the chakra elemental system, wind claims wood. Fire takes shadow and lightning. Then earth claims metal and sand. Water represents ice. Sand and wood can be interchanged in this cycle. This cycle is very common amongst many of the ancient societies, as these 4 elements do tend to govern the world, as each of them can be interpreted in several forms. B. 5-element cycle. Wood, fire, earth, metal, water. In the elemental system, fire takes shadow, earth takes sand, and water takes ice. Then wood represents wind. Finally, metal represents lightning, shadow, and lightning may be reversed with fire taking lightning and metal taking shadow. C. 5-element chakra cycle. Wind, lightning, fire, earth, and water. In the chakra system, fire takes shadow, earth takes sand and metal, and water takes ice. Technically, wine takes wood, as those 2 elements are interchangeable with each other in many societies. Then by default, metal is taken by lightning. This all depends on whether the cycle divides elements on their origin or equally. Sand and wood can be replaced. C. 8 trigram cycle. Wind, lightning, thunder, fire, earth, mountain, sand, sky, ice, lake, moon, shadow, and water. In the trigram system, the elements break down to wood, fire, earth, metal, and water once again, but this time with the addition of mountain, sky, and lake, moon. This cycle separates to wind and lightning, wood, fire, earth and sand, mountain, earth, ice, sky and shadow, lake, metal, and water, water. Here mountain is equated with sand due to both of their association with earth. Shadow represents lake, moon for their association with space, void. Ice takes sky by default. This is the second most accurate in describing chakra in its various forms, as it describes the majority of them accurately. The difference of one shinobi. Each of the sub-elements takes characteristics of the elements that it is comprised of, as well as some of the ones that it is the opposite of. Sand is similar to wind and water in movement, as well as earth when compared to soil. Sand is an element that moves via the wind as well as water. The similarities to water are in how it flows. It is closer to the way that water flows than soil because sand is liquid in movement. Sand doesn't clump unless wet, while soil can be in clumps even when dry. Metal mirrors earth in movement when solid, but water when molten. Metal when solid can be dense and a force to be reckoned with when uprooted by nature. Chunks of metal or stone can be life-threatening if thrown with enough force. Water and sand mirror metal when molten, for they all flow similarly. Ice mirrors wind in movement and earth in form when compact. Ice, like sand, moves via the wind. In this form, the intensity of the attack depends on the speed and intensity of the wind. In its compact form as snow, ice release had various varieties, but all of them are dangerous, for frostbite is something no one wants to deal with. Wood is a very simple element to explain. It has no real complement, though metal is similar in some aspects, but otherwise it is similar to almost all of the other elements in the sense that most of them are perpetually recycled to create something else. The plant element is interesting for it is one of the least wielded elements besides metal and shadow. The final true sub-element is shadow. It is different yet the same as the other elements, because like metal is comprised of all of the elements before it. It has many forms from its weakest form, shadow, to its strongest, void. The difference of one shinobi. The elements fall under the jurisdiction of the sun and the moon. Metal and shadow are both ruled by the sun and the moon, though the shadow is primarily ruled by the moon and metal by the sun. Metal represents light and time. Light chakra is the rarest type of pure chakra besides dark chakra. Very few even know of its existence. This group is comprised of elements that do not necessarily have a physical manifestation, a reflection, or represent time. Each of these elements has different aspects, but share two or more of these characteristics. Metal, sun type elements. Metal, fire, lightning, wind, and sand. Shadow represents darkness and space. Dark chakra is the rarest type of pure chakra besides light chakra. Very few even know of its existence. This group is comprised of elements that all share the common aspect of space. Each of these elements has a physical manifestation, though shadow being physical is debatable. Each of these elements has different aspects, but share two or more of these characteristics. Shadow, moon type elements. Shadow, water, earth, ice, and wood. Unlike the 8 element types, metal and shadow, or light and dark if you will, are pure chakra types that are not diluted by dual affinities. These chakra types are mainly utilized through attacks, though once in a while a few people will develop an affinity for either one, though the number is always balance. For example, as a person with a dark affinity dies, another is born at the same exact moment. A disturbance in the balance could forever ruin the world. The difference of one shinobi. Earth release, Doden, the bull. The first element is the element of earth. Earth is nurturing and helps to create all of the others. Earth becomes sand, turns into metal, forms shadows, purifies water, etc. Earth is often confused with its sub-element wood. For the soil, rocks, and minerals represent earth, while wood represents plant life. This element is passive, like water. This element is personified by the bull for a bull's strength and stubbornness. Fire release, Kaden, the phoenix. The second element is the element of fire. Fire can be controlled or unpredictable. It is fueled by plant life, can melt ice, can form metal and lightning, and is overcome physically by water, earth, dirt, and sand. This element is like the immortal phoenix as it will always gives life to something else and will come back eventually. Lightning release, Raiden, the dragon. The third element shares the temperament of a dragon. The element of lightning is unpredictable like fire, but requires even more precise control to contain. Lightning is a fickle element that may or may not help the user, but when it does it packs quite the bunch like a dragon. A dragon may not always help its master, but does know when it must do so. Water release, Sweden, the mermaid, the sea monster. The fourth element of water has two forms. It can be gentle, as in a gentle wave, or violent as a tsunami. Like its sister element of wind, these two elements are quite different from the others for who the intensity varies in many forms. A gentle wave is like the splash caused by the tail of a mermaid, yet a violent tidal wave is as if a sea monster has splashed one of its gigantic appendages in rage. A mermaid may be tricky, but you don't want to mess with a sea monster. Wind release, Futon, the eagle, the harpy. The fifth element is ruled by the ever-changing element of wind. Wind, like earth and water, is an element that has given birth to life. A gentle summer breeze is like the flapping of an eagle's wings. On the other hand, a typhoon represents the fury of a harpy. Unlike water, the more human representation is used to describe the harsher of the two. An eagle is simple-minded and may be territorial, but a harpy has the mannerisms of a protective eagle and a cunning human. There is no fury like a woman scorned. Ice release, Hyouden, the bear. Ice is an element that is often compared to a bear for its slumbers, and when it does awaken it does so with great fury. The sixth element of ice is not something you want to deal with in any of its form, no matter the intensity. Each of the forms is not something you want to deal with for long. Ice, sleet, hail, and snow each vary in density and form, but they are like a bear in how its aggression and fury can abate. Unlike its predecessors, this analogy may be harder to picture, but there is a reason ice is represented by the bear. Sand release, Sunadon, the wolf. A canine is chosen for the seventh element, for sand can be fun for a while, but with time can become quite a pain in the ass if you are not properly prepared to deal with it. Sand is dangerous whether it is in the form of landslides or sinkholes or even quicksand, but no matter what, sand will keep you on your toes. If you wield sand, it will be as loyal as any canine that you have treated well. If you are on the receiving end, it as if you have abused something beyond its breaking point and it is getting its revenge. You truly don't want to face a desert funeral or sand coffin. Wood release, Mokuden, the turtle. The turtle is the perfect rendition for the eighth element, for slow and steady will win the race. Wood is an element that accumulates much slower than the other elements, maybe except for water, ice, but can be accelerated under the correct conditions. The turtle is a slow defender, but someone anyone would be glad to wield. This element of life does more than simply create plants, it calms the spirits of Biju. The correlation most likely lies with the wooden element's deep connection with life. Metal release. Midorigan, the tiger. The tiger, like the phoenix, dragon, and turtle, has long been regarded as one of the 4, sometimes 5 guardians, of the world. Like lightning and sand, the true power of the element and its fury is best represented by a fierce animal. The tiger is an animal you don't want to get on its bad side. It is difficult to tame, like a tiger, but is something waiting for. Shadow release, Kageten, the Sphinx. The 10th and final element of shadow is something that differs from the other for in the way it moves. This element is as legendary as the Sphinx, a creature of legends. This element has its limitations like the 9 before it, but is far from being weak or undefeatable. There is much more on the subject, but as I am going to take up the roles of Nadaime Hokage in the upcoming weeks much more seriously, I will have far less time to research the history of the shinobi world. It is a shame that I will not have time to do so, but we are at a time of war and I must protect my brother's daughter. Sacrifices are made to protect those we love, and I am sad to say that this will be the final entry for the time being, hopefully. Before I had taken up the role from my brother, yet we're in times of relative peace, not it seems as if we are in a war we will be unable to win, but I must give it my all or my brother and I have done everything in vain. We established this village as a haven for those mistreated and feared for their abilities, a cause that has helped rise up the ranks so quickly. I only wished we had another year or 2 to prepare, but this is war. My brother spent his all facing a dragon in a battle of epic proportions few know of. It was on that day he lost his life against the 10-tailed beast, the dragon. He was able to seal the demon away on October the 10th day of the 10th month, fitting for the 10-tailed beast. He did so by encasing it in a hardened shell of wood that not even the strongest fire release jutsu could pierce. He sacrificed not the life of a newborn child, but his Mokuden special ability as the price to do so. It is a shame that such a powerful ability was lost, but it was more important to get rid of the potential threat caused by the beast than protecting a possible bloodline ability. If the Midorigan users were still here, we may have had a chance at maintaining wood-wielding shinobi, but it seems that the Uchiha have finished the last of them off, or so they thought. One of them is my wife, who was born without the blonde hair, a sign of the bloodline being completely inactive, and is currently in labor as we speak. The other we sent off to Whirlpool Country with a Hyuga, an Aburame, and a Kazama. With a heavy heart I was forced to seal the cave not far from the Valley of the End, named for it was the boundary of our new village and one we have recently conquered. I hope that no one learns of the 10-tailed beast statue or we will all be doomed. I hope that my wife delivers the child without problems and the final heir will live happily with his 3 guardians. I only hope my niece and my child will live long enough to see our village truly prosper. Hopefully the Midorigan appears once again, or the Uchiha will cause the entire continent to crumble with their greed and arrogance. Nadaime Hokage. October 27th. End of scroll. Author's note. You may recognize some of these elements and the associated animals from Digimon Frontier. The major difference is replace light with sand. The difference of one shinobi. 7 years previous, i.e. 7 years before Naruto graduates from the academy. 5-year-old Naruto Uzumaki had been dealt a hard life by fate, but nothing had been harder on the young soul than the absence of the single most important individual in his life. No, I am not talking about his, Oji-san, the Sandaime Hokage Sarutobi. We are talking about an Anbu known as, Washi, by Naruto. A blonde who had gone out of his way to protect our favorite citrus-hued hero. Well, that is before he was given that orange atrocity the Sandaime had dared to give him. Truthfully, Naruto hated orange. This so-called Anbu showed him the kindness that prevented him from breaking and decimating Konoha, then the rest of Fire Country, and then possibly the entire continent. For Naruto had no one to make sure he was fed, had clean clothes, or a roof over his head. The Sandaime cared for Naruto only for he did not want to break his promise to the Yondaime. It was truly sad when the greatest of men was as wicked as those he scorned for harming the legacy of the fourth. Naruto knew of the fox, well duh, it's kind of obvious from the drunken slurs, his birthday, and the constant glares and graffiti. But Naruto played the happy fool because Washi-sensei was kind to him and told him that he was not the fox, but just the container, something Naruto would come to terms with in the upcoming years. Naruto missed the one constant he had in his life for the majority of his early childhood. It was like ripping a mother away from a child. Washi didn't speak a lot, but when he did he spoke of the village, as it truly was, not how most saw it. A lot of it were things he said to himself, but with Kyuubi's memory, Naruto would recall a lot of the comments and make his attempts at rectifying them. Washi-sensei left, but not without a purpose. He's out there keeping me safe wherever he is. I must be strong for him because I will become Hokage someday and make him take off his mask. I cannot let him down. Tomorrow I will ask the old man to enroll me in the academy. I will be just like him. Naruto thought while tears continued to run down his face. At first they were tears of sorrow, but they soon turned to tears of joy at the thought of Washi being out there somewhere keeping him safe in some way. He knew that he wasn't truly abandoned, for no matter where his missions were, he was always there for Naruto every night to tuck him in. Naruto would be strong and get his revenge. Sure, there were a few nice people, but not enough to save the entire village. And by revenge Naruto meant more than a few harmless pranks. Note: Naruto may seem too smart to be 5 or 6, but think about the affect of interacting in Anbu, the Kyuubi, and only being allowed in the library on a daily basis. It would force you to mature and read quickly too. The difference of one shinobi. 6 years before graduation from academy. Naruto's lonely life had made a turn for the better by the opening of a ramen stand that would later become a landmark. The owner was a recently retired merchant that had taken over an old ramen stand. The old man had seen the aftermath of the villagers and shinobi attacking Naruto one night as he was closing up. His family had once owned the stand before hard times hit and they ventured into the merchant industry. After the attack of the Kyuubi, business was booming and many new establishments were opening within the Hidden Leaf village, showing how their fire would remain ignited. He, the ramen stand owner, knew of the secret that the boy held, but did not hold it against him. He was one of the few that had fully trusted in the Yondaime's ability and respected Naruto for the great burden he carried. For the old man at the ramen stand had seen his share of battles. He was much more than a merchant and a ramen shift. He would become one of Naruto's few precious people. The difference of one shinobi. Flashback. As Tsuki was cleaning down the stand, he heard trash cans knock over and sobbing. He went out back and had seen the vilest scene in his life, a child beaten within a few inches of his life. Dear Kami, what have they done to him? Have they no shame for dishonoring the Yondaime? Though Tyuki as he ran Naruto into the back of the stand. Ayame. He yelled and soon his daughter came running down the stairs. Father, what is wrong? It seems like the Yondaime's legacy has been injured by those who believe he is nothing more than a demon that needs to be killed. The two worked in silence taking care of as many of Naruto's injuries as they could. They knew it was too dangerous to go out on today of all days, October 10th, and try to get Naruto healed. For there were few ethics or morals in the civilian hospital. Even the shinobi hospital refused to treat the boy without threat from the Hokage. Tyuki knew of the Kyuubi and knew that as long as they began to get rid of a lot of the minor injuries and closed up some of the wounds, the Kyuubi could speed up the healing, but they wouldn't realize how fast it truly was until they were awoken from their thoughts by an empty stomach. After what seemed like hours, the boy had begun breathing more evenly and appeared to have broken out of the shock of the day's ordeal. Naruto had awoken to a clean dimly lit from that looked neither like the hospital or his apartment. He slowly turned, for he realized how painful it was after trying to sit up straight, and saw a girl asleep in a chair beside him. A warm sensation flooded through Naruto as he observed the numerous bandages and salves applied to his person. He knew that his tenant would take care of most of his problems, but the kindness was something he was still wary of. The next thing to happen would forever change the course of history in Konoha. Old man Tyuki entered the room and greeted Naruto with what else? A giant bowl of miso pork ramen. And that was the first of many days where the Ichiraku ramen bar, run by Tyuki and his daughter Ayame, would extend warm hospitality to the little blonde boy with the world's greatest burden. They would go as far to kick out any customers who had any problem with Naruto's presence, something he never took for granted. The ramen, it was something that reminded him of the good times he had, and the good times that were to come. End flashback. The difference of one shinobi. 5 years before academy graduation, 7-year-old Naruto Uzumaki had quickly gained a second title in the heart of Konoha's villagers. Besides being known as the demon, the boy had gained the reputation of being the #1 most unpredictable person, i.e. the master prankster of Konoha that not even the Anbu could take down. The Hokage could barely do so with the use of his crystal ball. While Naruto aimed for recognition through his pranks, he was smarter than he let on to the general populace, the shinobi that watched him, and the Hokage. The persona he portrayed was true to character, but he knew better than to show his true colors. For it was always better to allow your opponent, or in this case almost the entire village of Konoha, to underestimate you, and that was surely something Naruto was doing. The difference of one shinobi. 2 years before academy graduation, first academy failure. Naruto's lonely life had improved greatly on account of Tyuki and Ayame. He had begun to see them like family, and slowly the emptiness that had consumed his world had changed. His days were lonely except for his visits to the Ichiraku ramen or the few short visits Sarutobi made when he made his escapes from paperwork towering on his desk. Naruto had just failed because of his inability to perform the Bunshin Just You. It was a cruel twist of fate as the graduation jutsu requirements were done so someone with neither chakra training nor knowledge of how to use chakra could pass. And surely someone with the chakra supply of the Kyuubi would be unable to do a simple Bunshin. Class was boring for he was unable to grasp many of the concepts, not because he was dumb or didn't want to pay attention, but because he was starting from scratch, for he had no clan to train him or given the special lessons given to civilians aiming to become shinobi. Naruto had been enrolled in the academy at the insistence and financial expense of the Hokage, but it had done no use. His instructors were biased, determined to teach the Kyuubi nothing. Even Iruka, the kindest of them all, was unafraid of showing disdain to the boy carrying the demon that had cost him his family. Naruto was not an idiot, far from it. And normally this failure wouldn't look bad, but no one cared. Naruto enrolled in the academy several years early, so it would be no surprise if he didn't pass for another few years. Very few 10-year-olds were able to pass the genin exam. Even fewer even made it onto passing exams. Many took 3 tries before they got it. It was 4 strikes and you're out kind of policy, though most gave up after the second try. Very few even knew there was a 4th try, but they wouldn't dare tell the dead lasts. And surprisingly enough, it was often the dead lasts that ended up surprising everyone and becoming the true gems of the village. For the true geniuses are often those that are overlooked and misunderstood. If anyone is able to make it through an academy where you are treated unfairly and at a blatant disadvantage academically, you are a true genius. And those of no clan without anyone else to train them were even bigger geniuses of hard work. Being able to rise the ranks without a shinobi family was a true sign of a great shinobi in the making. Unfortunately, in Konoha it was the opposite. If you were an orphan or not from a shinobi family, you were automatically dismissed as being useless and having no potential. It didn't matter how hard you tried, you would always be treated differently, even if you became a Hokage and the greatest hero to ever walk the face of the shinobi continent. It was better to fail the genin exam than to fail to make a passing squad, yet people still poked fun at him for failing. The Sandaime didn't seem too surprised and wasn't too comforting. Naruto was ready to call it quits when he found an eagle sitting on his windowsill with a scroll tied around one of its claws. Naruto knew that everything would be better and he would prove everything wrong. Sure, it was no surprise he didn't pass his first time, most didn't. Naruto was just made the laughing stock because of his exam results. He had several examiners and senseis that were blatantly unfair to him. Said shinobi were faced with decisions between being fair or being tortured by Anko and Ibiki for a month straight and being demoted. You can guess what choice they all chose. You guessed it. The second one. Naruto was not dumb by any stretch of the imagination. He simply had a short attention span for close-minded idiots who refused to teach him anything. He learned everything he did from Washi, a Junin with weird yellow eyes, a lady with a trench coat, a man constantly speaking about the flames of youth, and a fellow orphan with panda-shaped hair.